The room goes still on the second clink. A glass slips, a bright ring cracks on tile, and the bride folds like a marionette with cut strings. Someone whispers a name that sounds like a plea. You smell citrus, sugar, and sudden panic. The thing is, a bridal shower should be safe, but the first clue is always hidden in plain sight. Jealousy, twin dynamics, a digital trail that doesn't lie. One dead, two sisters, one fiancé, and a phone that refuses to unlock itself. Who planned it? Who executed? Who benefited? We move from the screams to the first, cold piece of data. Start with the room, open plan loft, staged for soft celebration, white balloons framed by eucalyptus, a dessert table centered under a skylight. The seating forms a horseshoe around a low coffee table. Access points, front door, balcony slider, and a service corridor connecting the kitchen to the hall. It looks casual, but the flow is tightly managed. You don't seat people this carefully by accident. You do it to choreograph sightlines and timing. The toast station sits left of center, close to the kitchen pass-through. Champagne flutes in two neat rows, stems aligned like coordinates. A Bluetooth speaker on a credenza, volume low, a curated playlist meant to blur background chatter. From the doorway, you can reach the drinks table in 5 steps. From the kitchen, 3. The balcony is 11 steps, slow, because the rug bunches at the edge. Witnesses agree on the broad strokes and disagree on the edges. The bride laughed. The song was bright. The toast was quick. Then she swayed and the glass shattered. Some say her eyes went wide first. Others say she reached for the table and missed. The variance matters. Inconsistent accounts can be panic or they can be coaching. Here, the phrasing repeats, clean lines. She was fine, and then she wasn't. That's not memory, that's a script. The body language tells you more. The twin is close but not closest, 2 bodies away, with a job, handing out favors. Plausible deniability baked into party roles. She moves first at the collapse, then stops a half step out, palms raised. Instinct collides with something rehearsed. Her face settles too fast. Control under pressure is diagnostic. It points to foreknowledge or training. Here, it points to foreknowledge. The fiancé becomes hyper-helpful. He fetches water. He clears space. He tells someone to call. He delays by seconds that stretch. Those micro-delays can be shock, or they can be time-bought for a plan to breathe. Watch the eyes. He tracks the Bluetooth speaker twice, as if waiting for a cue. That's not grief. That's orientation. On the table, the potential delivery vectors are obvious. Drinks, canapés, small desserts with glazes that hide everything. But the symptom profile narrows the field. Sudden dizziness, rapid loss of motor control, no smell reported, no taste alarm. That suggests a fast-acting agent, soluble, low volume, and likely added post-pour to avoid. Dilution timing. A glass becomes the most efficient funnel. Minimal variables, direct ingestion, predictable onset. You look for physical markers. One flute bears a tiny abrasion at the rim, not decorative, not wear. A micro scratch consistent with tool contact. Tongs, a pipette tip, or a gloved fingernail with grit. It's small enough to miss unless you rotate the glass under light. That's the first non-digital, non-human tell. Now, the sound system. People treat speakers like furniture. Investigators treat them like routers with opinions. Pairing history reveals an unknown device that connected within an hour of guests arriving. The name is generic. The MAC prefix points to a phone brand popular enough to disappear in a crowd. But the pairing is new. Not in the host's remembered list, not in the fiancé's. And the autoplay cue changed 5 minutes before the toast, swapping in a track with a precise clink prompt. 2 bright taps that cued glasses to lips. That's orchestration. First responders record times, but the timestamps don't love each other. One caller says she dialed immediately. The call log shows a 40-second gap. Another says she sent a location pin to the group chat. The pin arrives after the sirens. The words repeat. She was fine, and then she wasn't. You've heard echoes before. Here, the echo is too clean. Consider the kitchen. Inventory shows a swapped label on a single bottle. Club soda over tonic, a neutral switch that changes who reaches for what. The bride avoids quinine. Her friends know. The switch pushes her toward champagne, direct path to the targeted vector. Heat patterns help when people forget. The venue's smart thermostat logs microfluctuations. A hot zone hugs the bar for 8 minutes before the collapse. Someone hovered there, body heat raising localized temperature. That someone isn't captured clearly on camera because the security feed blinks. A narrow loop, 15 minutes, just enough to hide an entrance or hands at work. Then, the twins' proximity. Her prints on favors, not on flutes. The fiancé's prints on stems from setup, older, smudged. On the abrasive marked glass, partials that don't match immediate family or close friends. A lotion compound detected in the skin cells carries a foreign additive, uncommon in this social circle. That's a clue that feels mundane until you match it to a mobile device that keeps showing up as unknown. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, you pivot to behavior. The twin takes responsibility roles all day, then goes silent in the group chat within minutes of the collapse. The fiancé overcommunicates. Volume without substance. Common when someone tries to dominate the narrative. But the real question is, who set the timing? Who needed the clink to land and the glass to lift? The Bluetooth speaker gives you a thread. The service corridor gives you a second. Someone with access slipped between kitchen and floor, altered a label, touched one glass, and nudged an audio cue. It's controlled chaos. It reads like a rehearsal finally played out. Across the room, a child tells a small story that matters. Reaching for a cookie, he saw the twin near the drinks alone. It's a micro-story that sharpens the frame. She was there. She had motive. But the unknown device was there too, pairing itself and inserting a sound no one noticed. Which brings us to the digital footprint, the part that doesn't forget and doesn't panic. Start with the mirror that never quite agrees. On photographs, the twins read as copies. Same bone structure, same half-moon smile that tilts more on the left, but presentation isn't identity. One curates, the other improvises. The bride builds lists, color codes, calendars, anchors herself with routines that make anxiety behave. Her twin lives in the margins, flexible, spontaneous, allergic to plans that pin her down. It's not villain and hero. It's two adaptations to the same childhood pressure. Be exceptional, but make it look effortless. Think about this as an ecology. Validation is the scarce resource. In school, the bride collects it through consistency. Grades that never dip, clubs that run on time because she arrives early. The twin earns it in bursts. Debate wins after last-minute prep. Parties where she knows everyone's name within an hour. Both strategies pay until milestones divide them. Engagements, promotions, public markers of success act like droughts. Scarcity spikes. So does competition. Text threads tell that story without exposition. You see the bride screenshotting hotel options with practical captions. Close to venue. Good lighting for photos. The twin replies with confetti emojis, then adds a subtle jab. Wow, you really went standard. It reads like a joke, unless you count the pattern. Over months, the twins' jokes orbit the same sun. You're safe, you're predictable, you don't risk. The bride replies with the language of peacekeeping. It works for us. It's fine. I like simple. Underneath, she's holding the line on her values. Underneath the twins' humor, there's a ledger. Prior partners amplify the comparison loop. The bride dates men who wear routine like a second skin. They show up, they text back, they buy the right size batteries. The twin is drawn to edges, people with high charisma and low follow-through. Quick closeness, quicker fatigue. When a relationship ends, the twin reframes the loss as a choice. Control restored rhetorically, if not emotionally. By the time the fiancé enters the picture, the profiles are set. He is more bride than twin on the surface, reliable job, clean apartment, favorite grocery aisle. But he carries an unexamined need for novelty. He likes to be needed and likes to be noticed. Those aren't crimes. They're vulnerabilities. Financial asymmetry adds quiet gravity. The bride's career stabilizes early. Her savings grow. She lends the twin money once for a deposit, once for a car repair. No lectures, just a simple, pay me back when you can. The twin pays back in bursts, then stops, then avoids the subject. Debts become narrative triggers. In group chats, the twin bristles when the bride offers logistics help. I've got it. Don't mom me. I'm not a project. Pride meets practicality. Friction accumulates. Social media exposes another seam. The twin overshares, then curates after the fact. Delete, archive, repost with a sharper caption. The bride posts rarely, mostly milestones. The algorithm notices the twin more. So do the fiancé's friends. Likes find the twin because she plays to the room. The bride doesn't. That imbalance is small, but repetition turns it into a drumbeat. Applause for one, quiet for the other. Jealousy isn't a single spike, it's a waveform. In private, the twins negotiate their difference with ritual. They trade clothes. They exchange birthday pranks that are more sweet than sharp. They have a code phrase for calling out when a joke lands too hard. Left shoe, meaning you're off balance me. That code appears in old messages, then fades in the months before the shower, replaced by emojis and thumbs ups. Distance doesn't announce itself. It drifts. You map the competition patterns across time. When the bride gets into the program she wanted, the twin goes silent for 3 days, then arrives with a big gesture, a handmade card, a loud toast that makes everyone laugh. When the twin lands a contract, the bride shows up with spreadsheets to help budget. Both care, both keep score. Neither admits it out loud. The identity split also shapes how they handle conflict. The bride avoids confrontation, reroutes anger into tasks. If she's hurt, she organizes. If she's scared, she cleans. The twin confronts obliquely. Humor, then silence, then a late-night burst of honesty that evaporates by morning. So when their lives enter shared spotlight territory, the engagement, the shower planning, these modes collide. The bride wants structure. The twin wants voice. Each reads the other's need as judgment. Now, jealousy as chronic condition. Not rage, not cruelty, a background buzz that spikes around public milestones where mirrors multiply. Engagement photos, dress fittings, seating charts. The twin performs enthusiasm, then texts a friend something tight. Of course she picked that. The bride senses it and collapses inward rather than pushing out. Incidents pile. A misunderstood joke at a tasting, a missed RSVP deadline, a snide comment about the fiancé's playlist. None are crimes, all are context. Then there's the device layer, the modern diary. The bride's phone shows incrementalism, calendar blocks, meal plans, shared lists with the fiancé. The twin's phone reflects volatility, photo dumps at 2 a.m., notes app confessions that read like stage directions. Don't ruin this. Smile. Say, you love it. Here's the important shift. Weeks before the shower, both phones adjust rhythm. The bride's silence increases in group spaces, decreases in one-on-one messages with her twin. The twin's jokes sharpen, then soften, then stop. That's the baseline before the affair begins to rewrite the script. This is why identity and jealousy matter. They don't explain the crime. They explain the susceptibility. The twins' hunger for singular attention meets the fiancé's need to be exceptional in someone's eyes. The bride's avoidance of confrontation creates a vacuum. It's not fate, it's opportunity. And somewhere in that opportunity, a third mind watches the waveform and decides to set a beat. 3 hours earlier, a single line lands at 12:41 a.m. Left shoe? It's the dead code resurfacing, sent from the twin to the bride's fiancé. He answers with a joke the bride would recognize, except the punctuation is wrong. People text in patterns. When patterns shift, relationships shift with them. The first breadcrumb isn't the words, it's the audience. A late-night message is a door left ajar. The metadata says they're within a mile of each other, not at home. Location tags bleed through when you forget to scrub a photo. A storefront reflection shows his jacket in the corner of her selfie, cropped like an afterthought. Cropping is a confession with better lighting. Now, the mechanics. It starts digital because that's where risk feels least real. The twin sends a meme that only the fiancé and bride share history for, a bad song from a road trip, an inside eye roll. He replies too fast. The bride usually replies with a delay, a practical question, an emoji mapped to a schedule. He comes back with warmth unbuffered by time. That's the thrill talking. Their routes begin to overlap. Fitness app summaries show parallel runs 2 mornings in a row. The maps don't match perfectly, but their peaks align. Same hill, same pause near a coffee shop that doesn't do mobile orders. Neutral ground is a choice. It keeps the story off familiar cameras. He tells himself it's safe because it's words and coffee. He compartmentalizes. If he can keep categories clean, fiancé here, confidant there, then nothing bleeds. The problem is, the mind isn't a set of drawers. It's a locked box with a thin lid. Pressure builds, lids pop. She escalates by proximity. Digital intimacy shifts to physical with small tests. A shoulder touch when laughing, a shared secret that excludes the bride by design. Guilt is managed through justification. She needs me to understand him. He needs me to translate her. Translation becomes permission. This isn't a lover's leap. It's a series of steps that feel reversible until they aren't. The twins' notes app logs the pivot with a sentence she never sends. I make him better. That line becomes the belief that drives planning. If she frames the connection as improvement, then the betrayal feels like rescue. That's the self-story that lets her sleep. The bride senses something and withdraws instead of confronting. Her chat volume dips. Her texts move from planning to polite. A thread about seating charts ends mid-sentence. She types 3 dots, erases, sends a neutral sticker. Avoidance is her armor. Silence is not peace. It's fog. Meanwhile, search histories start to hum. The twin looks up, how to tell if he's lying, and micro-expressions eye contact guilt. He searches how to end emotional affair and doesn't click any articles longer than 3 minutes. He wants a quick fix. He doesn't want reflection, just a lever to pull. The digital breadcrumbs cluster around neutral venues, an art supply store they both start frequenting despite neither posting art. Loyalty card pings show overlap within 15 minutes, twice in 1 week. They start using payment methods that don't leave obvious trails. Gift cards, cashbacks converted to store credit. That's not romance. That's risk management. Then, a draft message sits unsent on the fiancé's phone, addressed to the bride. We need to talk after the shower. He never sends it. He thinks he's protecting the event. He's actually protecting the rush. Delay is a choice. Consequences collect interest. You watch a hidden device begin to nudge. The unknown phone that paired with the speaker starts earlier than the party. It appears near both of their routes, late-night logins to a shared playlist they use during group hangouts. Tracks are reordered to place one specific song higher, their private in-joke. It's bait disguised as nostalgia. Divide, isolate, accelerate. Those are the manipulator's verbs, but we aren't there yet. What matters now is motive thickening into motion. The twin tests the perimeter with minor sabotage that reads as mischief. A calendar invite sent to the bride at a time she's always in a meeting, ensuring she'll miss a tasting. He comforts the bride when it goes wrong. "I'll take care of it." The triangle tightens. Every fix binds them. On maps, their routes cross near a park with no cameras on the east gate. Heat signatures from nearby smart lights show motion at consistent intervals over 2 weeks. Same window, same pattern of stop and start. People are metronomes when they're hiding in plain sight. By the time kissing happens, it's anticlimax to the psychology. The inciting incident isn't the first touch, it's the first rationalization that sticks. He tells himself it's a mistake he can control. She tells herself it's justice against a lifetime of being second. Both are lies that feel like oxygen. And yet, it's not that dark. No grand declarations, no operatic vows, just two people making small, selfish choices that line up too well. The danger grows not from malice, but from momentum. The twin opens a private calendar, labels blocks with harmless titles, syncs it to a hidden account. He shares a document to plan surprises for the bride. Shared tools become secret channels. Their devices start to hum with the same vocabulary, phrases mirrored across texts that the bride won't see. Mirror talk is a tell. It's also an invitation for anyone watching to push. Somewhere, a third mind notices the pattern and decides to write the next line for them. Now, let's look at the mechanics of intent turning into action. Purchases first. The twin acquires a prepaid SIM under a tourist promotion. Cash, kiosk, no ID scan. She pairs it with a mid-tier handset bought secondhand. The receipts look like impulse buys, but the pattern says otherwise. The phone case, the matte screen protector to avoid fingerprints. The small bottle of lab-grade cleaner labeled for camera lenses. It's overkill, unless you plan to handle shared devices and leave nothing behind. Calendar traces betray discipline she rarely shows. On her main phone, she blocks yoga, returns, drop-off. On the hidden account, synced to a private calendar, those blocks align with recon windows. Checking the venue, shadowing the caterer's arrival times, mapping where the Bluetooth speaker sits when the room is dressed. The titles are innocuous because innocuous travels well through scrutiny. Search queries tighten the ring. She cycles through dosage windows for agents that dissolve in alcohol without obvious taste, then pivots to safe-sounding substitutes to mask intent. She reads about delivery mechanisms that avoid foam, that prefer still to sparkling. She doesn't search poison by name, she searches effects by symptom. That reduces direct culpability, but it also shows a mind trying to stay one step away from the word murder. Recon leaves clean digital scuffs. The venue Wi-Fi logs a new device handshake 2 days before the shower. Same MAC prefix as the unknown pairing at the party, but with a different device name. Factory default, lazy camouflage. She walks the service corridor twice, lingers by the pass-through, takes photos of the bar layout framed as decor inspiration. Metadata preserves the truth she hopes the image erases. Now, something she doesn't see. A third device appears in the same logs, minutes after hers connects. It holds a VPN that rotates exit nodes, but the timing overlaps too neatly to be chance. The unseen operator visits the admin panel, tests credentials, then backs out. That's the manipulator sampling the perimeter, verifying access without tripping alarms. The fiancé's contribution reads like naivety disguised as help. He schedules posts to his hobby group the day of the shower, auto-publishes a check-in at a hardware store, and loads a couple of photos into drafts with future timestamps. He thinks of alibi as content strategy. He's not wrong on mechanics. He's wrong on what it costs. The twin graduates from study to rehearsal. She buys disposable gloves at a pharmacy far from her neighborhood and a set of small tongs marketed for ice. She adds a travel-size hand cream with no scent and a lotion with a rare silicone additive that resists transfer. That latter choice will mark her without her knowing. Chemical footprints are as telling as fingerprints when you compare social circles. She practices with glassware at home. Camera roll shows short bursts of video, placing a micro drop at a rim, timing the slide into liquid, testing a stir that won't show ripple lines. She's precise in a way she rarely sustains in other parts of life. That's how motive rewires behavior. It focuses drift. The manipulator moves from observation to orchestration. They seed calendar nudges, anonymous invites that land on the twins' private account with reminders labeled as innocuous chores. They reorder a shared playlist used by the friend group, slipping in an audio clip with a clear two-clink motif to condition timing. They draft messages on the fiancé's phone while he's distracted, saved but unsent, ready to push with one tap if anxiety wobbles the plan. Control extends to infrastructure. Venue router logs note a new admin user created, then deleted within the same hour. A phantom account that leaves only the shadow of its existence. Firmware on the Bluetooth speaker updates off-cycle, bringing in a feature few guests would notice. Autoplay on connection with a pre-selected cue. That's not random maintenance. That's a set piece. The kitchen becomes a chessboard. A single label swap. Club soda over tonic, executed cleanly, adhesive aligned to avoid suspicion. It's a behavioral nudge, not a direct weapon, steering the bride toward champagne as the safest choice in a room full of options. That's the point. Reduce variables. If the target reaches for the glass you've mapped, timing becomes predictable. A dry run occurs the day before. The twin arrives early under the banner of helping decorate. She carries a tote with favors, gloves slipped among pastel tissue. She hovers at the bar longer than necessary, arranging flutes into even rows. The manipulator's device pops online from the service corridor, a quick dance through settings, a test of the playlist cue. The fiancé texts a photo of the setup to the group. He thinks he's sharing progress. He's time-stamping culpability. Searches pivot again. How to stay calm when nervous. Breathing to stop shaking. Dizziness after champagne normal. She's building a narrative that if anything goes wrong, she can call it a panic attack. That's pretext engineering. A third shadow tightens the loop. The manipulator tests a rideshare 2 blocks from the venue, pays with a gift card purchased in a chain store where cameras point everywhere and nowhere. They also pair briefly to a smart fragrance diffuser during setup, not as poison delivery, but as a metronome. Timed burst aligned with the toast to reinforce when the glasses should rise. The twin doesn't know she's being cued by a machine. She thinks she's following her own plan. This is how operational build looks when jealousy drives and a technician rides shotgun. The twin designs for deniability. The fiancé offers structure without insight. The manipulator hardens the timeline and installs fail-safes. By the night before the shower, the plan breathes on its own. All it needs is a clink, a lift, and 30 seconds of silence. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, consider the third mind in the room, the one that prefers gloves made of distance, not family, not inner circle. Adjacent enough to know routines, far enough to avoid holiday photos. The profile begins with pattern, not name. Late-night logins, clean exits, interventions that feel like coincidence until you stack them and see design. Start with access. The unknown device appears where it shouldn't. Venue Wi-Fi 2 days before the shower, then again through the service corridor on the dry run. The MAC prefix rotates across consumer brands using a VPN, which tells you the user plans for a generic camouflage, but overcompensates with privacy tools casual users don't bother with. That combination, ordinary hardware, extraordinary caution, points to a practiced opportunist, not a paranoid novice. Cold calculation with a light touch. Now, motive. Opportunists don't build new conflicts, they harvest existing ones. And jealousy between twins is fertile ground. The manipulator's edits don't create feelings, they structure them. Think of the mind as a locked box with a lid that lifts when pressure spikes. This person doesn't pry the box open. They tap the hinge, time the push, and step back to watch. tie to the fiancé comes through a low-traffic channel, a dormant hobby group chat that limped along for months. The manipulator surfaces there with casual credibility, old in jokes, correct nicknames, timing that suggests prior attendance rather than recent stalking. It's adjacent social sphere access, enough to track the fiancé's tells. When he posts, when he drafts, how he covers anxiety with productivity. A controller's dream. Behavior shows preference for indirect control. The manipulator doesn't risk direct contamination, no fingerprints on the flute, no obvious appearance at the party photos. Instead, they manipulate systems that outsource presence, speaker firmware, playlist order, router admin. The power is in timing, not touch, and the payoff isn't money. It's leverage, revenge, or thrill. Which one? You look for signals. The VPN pattern is disciplined but human. Exit nodes bounce across regions at predictable hours, late-night cycles that align with a local cafe's open Wi-Fi. Not the main network, the guest splash that requires a click-through. That choice says confidence and routine. They use public networks as masks, but always the same types. Coffee shops with long tables and indifferent staff. The imprint of a life that sits near community, never in it. Digital fingerprints leave taste notes. They favor clean folder structures, proper capitalization in device names before they scrub them, and a habit of drafting, not sending. They queue messages, schedule actions, and keep their hands off triggers until the last safe second. That's a project manager's brain in a saboteur's body. Control without exposure. Next, the motive hypothesis. Revenge is plausible given the hobby group tie. Maybe a grievance, credit taken, opportunity lost, a public slight that stuck. Leverage is possible if the affair offers blackmail. But listen to the rhythm of their interference. Divide, isolate, accelerate. That cadence suggests parasitic thrill. The joy isn't in outcome, it's in orchestration. The bride isn't a target to them, she's a stage. The twins are instruments. The fiancé is a switch that toggles easily under pressure. You pressure test this with the diffuser pairing. Why touch a scent device? Not for poison, for timing. A control freak uses redundant cues, audio clinks, scent bursts, playlist tempo shifts. If one fails, the others nudge. That redundancy isn't revenge screaming. It's craft. And craft is its own reward to people who like watching the world move because they pushed an invisible button. Proximity analysis narrows the social ring. The lotion compound found on the flute, rare silicone profile, shows up in a nearby boutique's receipts tied to a temp worker roster during the month of planning. That worker is paid in cash with a matching gift card pattern seen in the rideshare used at exit. We aren't naming yet, but we're drawing a silhouette. Someone who swims just outside formal payrolls, who knows service corridors better than seating charts, who understands how events breathe. The manipulator's language bleeds into edit histories. Track descriptions in the shared playlist include micro-punctuation quirks, EM, dashes with spaces, double spaces after periods. That same pattern appears in calendar invite descriptions sent to the twins' hidden account. Writers are consistent in their mistakes. Machines preserve them. Psychologically, this is a feeder. They push conflict nutrients into hosts and watch symptoms bloom. They choose an environment where chaos looks like an accident, high noise, low oversight, cameras that loop because everyone trusts the day more than the system. They install a fail-safe narrative. If everything collapses, the twin appears as sole architect. That's not mercy. That's insurance. Why them? The fiancé's group gave them a window. The twins' oversharing made prediction easy. The bride's event promised cover. A three-factor selection. Not random. Calculated. The manipulator wants a story that writes itself while they hold the pen off camera. So, the initial profile. Adjacent social sphere. Disciplined with tech, but casual enough to leave one human seam. A controller who enjoys the build more than the aftermath. Tethered to the fiancé through an old chat, moving through service workspaces where access keys hang on hooks and no one asks names. Strategy, driven by redundancy and deniability. The next move is clear. You wait for one error, one moment the mask lifts, even for a second. And when it does, you catch the real IP that ties the ghost to a chair. The thing about ghosts is they get comfortable. Routine breeds a slip. We find it in a cafe where the Wi-Fi splash page looks innocent. Just a button that says, connect. On a Tuesday, 11:12 p.m., the manipulator forgets to toggle the VPN before clicking. For 60 seconds, their real IP breathes. The cafe's captive portal logs it, ties it to a device fingerprint, handset model, OS version, patch lag 3 cycles behind. That lag matches the unknown device that paired with the speaker. Same update procrastination. Same habit of fixing everything but the boring stuff. Public networks keep simple ledgers: device name, MAC address, session length. The device name is cleaned, factory default. But the OS telemetry leaks a tiny quirk, a language pack installed for a region this city doesn't use. We saw that pack in edit strings on the playlist earlier. The EM-spacing is standard in that region. Writers leave accent marks even when they think they're typing straight. From the portal, we pivot to the cafe's router diagnostics. It tags the device to a seat zone back wall near the outlet that flickers. A camera catches hands, not faces. The hands type fast, pause often, double space after periods. That rhythm is the same in calendar invite descriptions that hit the twins' private account. Style is a fingerprint when you have enough samples. Now we correlate. The cafe IP resolves to a residential block where a co-working space leases a unit by the month. The leaseholder is a generic LLC. The access logs show late-night badge-ins that align with the VPN windows we mapped previously. They're not always at the cafe. Sometimes they take the elevator one floor up, sit in a chair with a view of the street, and route through a private network with poor segmentation. On the night of the unmasked minute, both networks show life. That's the error. 2 doors open at once. Device telemetry from the cafe links to the unknown handset at the venue through Bluetooth behavior. Same device advertises a transient name when scanning for accessories, then hides. The scan interval is a tell, aggressive for 60 seconds, then quiet for 5. The pattern repeats. We saw that cadence in the speaker's pairing log during setup. Machines keep time even when people think they're improvising. On the content side, calendar invites tied to the bride circle contain invisible tags, Unicode characters that don't render but do sort. Those tags match the keyboard layout of the unmasked device. They're a way to pin actions to moments without overt alarms. When sent, burst triggers, when the clink cue lands, when the toast begins. The manipulator uses these tags like pins on a map only they can see. The unmasked minute proves the tags come from this specific device, not a copycat. The contact graph closes the triangle. The unmasked IP engages a dormant group chat where the fiancé lurks. A maintenance bot posts a harmless reminder at 11:14 p.m., then vanishes. The bot handle resolves to an email alias created 3 months earlier, verified against a phone number bought with a gift card. That number shows up in rideshare receipts used 2 blocks from the venue on the day of the shower. It's a weak link until you add the cafe. Then it's a chain. We also catch a draft. The device logs show a push to the fiancé's phone. Remote draft, save via a cloud service with edit history retained for 30 days. The draft reads like comfort. Trust the timing. We've seen that phrase in his thread at the shower. He thought he typed it. He didn't. The manipulator preloaded the words he would need when panic hit. That's control by suggestion, not force. Elegant and cold. Here's the first clear intent signal. A scheduled nudge to the twin that fires the morning of the party, disguised as a self-reminder from her private calendar. The content is neutral. Refresh glasses after speech. But the timestamp lines up with the maid of honor's runtime only if you assume the speech will overrun. The manipulator assumes it because they edited the playlist tempo to encourage longer applause between segments. The environment itself was tuned to produce delay. One more seam opens. The unmasked device checks router stats at the venue through a backdoor left by the phantom admin user. It pings the Wi-Fi health during the 15-minute camera loop window, then posts a test file named with a harmless extension and a signature hash we've already seen in the diffuser's pairing log. It's the same operator, same toolkit, same comfort with infrastructure. And then the human flourish. In the cafe footage, the hands hesitate over the keyboard, then correct a word most people wouldn't misspell. Later in the interrogation, that same correction pattern will slip out in speech. But we aren't there yet. For now, the single error, the naked IP, anchors the profile to a place, a device, and a behavior set. The ghost blinks. We see eyes behind the sheet. Now, let's look at the mechanics of control. The manipulator doesn't shout. They whisper through systems. Divide first. Curated screenshots arrive like seeds. A photo of a text thread between the bride and a friend is trimmed to remove context, then passed to the twin through an anonymous relay. She called you predictable. The original line was softer. Predictable is her comfort. The manipulator recuts tone into insult. On the fiancé's side, a screenshot of the twins' left shoe lands with the bride's name blurred at the top, implying a shared code revived by the bride, not the twin. He reads betrayal in the wrong direction. It hooks his guilt and flips it. They fabricate proximity. Location pins are delayed and layered. The twin appears near the fiancé's gym at times. She wasn't. The fiancé appears at the twin's coffee spot when he's at home. The manipulator achieves this by editing map share caches and replaying old coordinates. You think you saw someone. You actually saw a timestamp dressed in the present. Doubt grows. Doubt divides, which brings us to isolation. Once friction starts, the manipulator suppresses counsel. The bride's best friend is quietly muted in group threads by a silent admin rule. Messages still send, but they don't surface on lock screens for the twin. The fiancé's brother gets auto-filtered to a folder labeled Later. Later never comes. These are small administrative edits, executed through shared tools that everyone trusts: calendars, playlists, chat apps. The result is predictable. People lean inward. They stop checking assumptions with the only voices that might slow the slide. Isolation isn't only social, it's cognitive. The manipulator floods both the twin and the fiancé with micro-reminders that keep their working memory busy. Bring ice, confirm cake knife, test sound. They're harmless tasks, but they create decision fatigue. A tired mind defaults to suggestion. The manipulator places those suggestions in drafts, in templates, in autofill. Trust the timing, refresh the glasses. When adrenaline spikes, they don't think, they select. Accelerate runs on deadlines. The shower date becomes a pressure cooker. The manipulator tightens intervals. Tight playlist transitions that encourage early toasts. DM nudges labeled as event tips. A timer embedded in the diffuser schedule that primes the room with a subtle scent burst 30 seconds before the clink cue. That sensory nudge isn't about smell, it's about memory. Humans anchor action to rhythm and recurrence. The manipulator builds a metronome only they control. They also install fail-safes, drafted messages as sit in queues with near-identical phrasing ready to deploy if hesitation surfaces. If the twin texts, "I can't," a reply from the fiancé fires, comforting and confident, but authored elsewhere. If the fiancé waffles, the twin receives a screenshot of a fake chat suggesting the bride plans to postpone the wedding because something feels off. It's a lie size to sting, not to shock. A moderate wound that pushes action rather than paralysis. Control extends into the environment. The playlist carries a track that includes the two-tap clink. Guests laugh and raise glasses reflexively. The manipulator times it after a long speech section to exploit social relief. People drink when tension breaks. The camera loop window opens at the same minute, not to hide a person for long, but to blur a sequence: who touched which glass, who moved toward the bar, who hesitated. Blur equals doubt. Doubt consumes inquiry time. Divide again, deeper. The twin receives out-of-context compliments about the fiancé from a third contact. He says you get him. Seeded by the manipulator through a spoofed account. She reads it as recognition. The fiancé receives a meme about choosing chaos sent from a handle that mirrors a friend's style. He laughs, then performs. People don't commit to plans, they commit to identities. The manipulator sells identities. Now, the final step in the playbook: accelerate with scarcity. A message lands the morning of the shower on the twins' hidden calendar, one window after toast. Scarcity heightens value. It also narrows options. If she believes there's only one clean chance, she stops hunting for better choices. She reaches for the mapped glass. The manipulator doesn't need to hold her hand. They only need her to agree with yesterday's self. And yet, it isn't maximal darkness, no gore, no cinematic monologue, just a patterned push. The twin thinks the plan is hers, slow, deniable sabotage. The manipulator retools it to be immediate and lethal by tightening timing and stripping redundancies she believed were safety features. He believes he's managing panic with reassurance. The reassurance was planted. Both become instruments. The manipulator conducts. What keeps this hidden is plausibility. Every act can masquerade as normal event prep. Every digital nudge can pass as a helpful reminder. Every misfire can be blamed on tech. That's the genius and the flaw. Because when you build a system that depends on perfect timing, a single wobble becomes a flare. The playlist glitch, the toast delay, the Wi-Fi flicker, they aren't random. They're the tells that the metronome isn't a coincidence. As the door closed behind her, the room wasn't a party yet. It was a floor plan. The twin arrived early with a tote that rattled softly, favors peeking out like alibis. She smiled at the venue manager, took the kind of breath people take before a speech, and went straight to the bar. Fewer eyes there, more surfaces to control. She laid out the flutes in exact rows, 12, then 12, nudging stems until they looked machine-placed. Precision satisfies nerves. It also sets a baseline so any later disturbance reads as cleaning, not tampering. Her gloves, thin, transparent, were folded inside tissue like a gift to herself. She slipped them on without looking down, muscle memory learned from practice videos that never left her camera roll. In the kitchen, inventory was routine for everyone except the person counting motives. A single label peel on a bottle, club soda over tonic, done clean. She worked slowly, using a plastic scraper so the adhesive didn't stretch and betray the swap. The replacement cap turned with a click that sounded normal because she'd rehearsed that sound, until normal was a prop. Neutral switch, targeted effect. Push the bride toward champagne and away from mixers with quinine. Variable reduction is what separates impulse from plan. On the credenza, the Bluetooth speaker blinked like a quiet witness. Firmware didn't ask permission. It accepted opportunity. The manipulator's device came alive from the service corridor, paired and unpaired, then slipped an update and off cycle. Autoplay primed on connect. Cue reshuffled so the two-tap clink landed exactly where social relief would crest. A test run played at low volume in an empty room, the twins' head tilting as if hearing a private instruction. That's the dry run. Condition the room before the people arrive. The router logs tell you more than any recollection will. A new admin user appeared, 8 characters, hat tip to nothing, then vanished within the hour. Credentials created to open a window, then burned to hide the draft. During that window, the camera loop was tuned, not disabled. Looping erases sequence without screaming sabotage. It buys a fog you can drive through and swear you saw the road. Back at the bar, the twins staged a spill drill. A dropper, not visible in photos, touched a practice glass. She timed the spread, watched it vanish into nothing, then wiped the rim with a cloth she would later throw away. She arranged tongs next to ice like a hospitable detail. Tools become props when you need your hands to look like they're doing what they should. The fragrance diffuser hummed like a quiet metronome. Paired once, briefly, to an unknown device during setup, it accepted a burst schedule aligned to the toast window. Not poison, cue. Scent primes behavior more reliably than memory does. 30 seconds before clink, a subtle note would rise, not to be noticed, but to be felt. The twin would call it instinct. It was calibration. The fiancé across town strengthened an alibi he didn't know was brittle. Scheduled posts drafted with the manipulator's quiet help queued up. One hobby tip, one location check-in, one photo captioned as if real time. He believed timelines like they were facts. He didn't see that drafts can travel through days while intent stays in the room. Kitchen staff did a quick inventory with an extra set of eyes they didn't clock. A temp worker added off book, inspected trays and logged temperatures. Cash paid, name borrowed, face unremarkable in a way that's hard to remember later. A gloved hand adjusted a cake knife angle no one would photograph, then moved on. Event prep is busy enough that added motion looks like help. In the service corridor, a phone camera clicked decor shots, balloons against brick, eucalyptus under skylight. Harmless images with metadata that did the talking. Angles conveniently included the bar in the background, glasses aligned, speaker positioned, power strip draped like a fuse. The twin texted one to the group. "Looks so good." The fiancé hearted it, adding a timestamp to a stage neither thought of as evidence yet. Fear needs a story to hold on to. The twins searched breathing techniques, scrolled advice threads about shaking hands, saved a list titled Calm Cues to her private notes. She pictured herself smiling, pouring, hosting. In that vision, the glass was just a prop. Deniability wrapped itself around intention, like lace around a blade. She wasn't thinking murder. She was thinking control. But control had a second author. The manipulator tested the rideshare route they'd later use, paid with a gift card, bought where cameras blur faces into hats and coats. They posted a throwaway file through the router, a health check disguised as noise, embedding the same signature hash we'd find on the diffuser pairing. Redundancy as religion. One more rehearsal. The playlist sequencing, a bright track with a clean two-tap in the middle. The manipulator nudged tempo so applause would linger, pushing the toast just late enough that thirst met suggestion. People raise glasses when rhythm tells them to. The twin lingered by the bar, then stepped back, measuring the distance from where she'd hand favors to where she'd need to be when the cue landed. 11 steps, slow, because the rug bunches. Outside, the street carried nothing suspicious. Inside, the room now breathed to someone else's count. The dry run didn't look like plotting. It looked like love of detail. That's how you hide intent in plain sight. You call it prep. And by the time the tape came off the cake box and the flutes shone under skylight, the plan didn't need courage. It needed only compliance with a clock. The thing is, a plan like this doesn't require many moving parts, just one object everyone agrees to touch. The glass becomes the instrument because glass remembers pressure, heat, and hesitation even when it won't hold fingerprints cleanly. We start at the rim, where intent meets skin. Rotate the flute under angled light, and the micro-scratch shows itself, a shallow crescent on the drinker's side. Not factory, not wear. It's consistent with a micro-abrasion from a hard edge, a pipette tip, a tong corner, or a gloved fingernail dusted with fine grit from the prep counter. The scratch isn't proof of poison. It's proof of contact. That's enough to narrow the field. Now gloves and tongs. People bring tools to look hygienic. They also use them to avoid direct transfer. The twin staged a spill drill the day before. That taught her distance. But the application here reads cleaner, more confident. The drop would need to meet the meniscus and ride the curve without purling or clinging to the rim. That calls for a small, controlled delivery, angled to exploit surface tension. One smooth touch, then retreat. We map selection by choreography. The twin hands favors two bodies away. The cue hits. She turns, steps 11 paces, slow because the rug bunches, arrives as laughter crests. In that beat, she does not hand a glass. She moves a glass. A staged micro-spill creates motion. She wipes with a cloth meant for show. Under cover of tidying, she nudges one flute forward, then centers it. Hosts perform order. Guests accept it. The bride reaches for the tidied choice because it sits where choice usually sits. A child's micro-story sharpens it. He reached for a cookie and saw the fun ant near the drinks alone. No clatter, no panic, just proximity. He doesn't clock a device, but the Bluetooth log does. The unknown handset pairs and unpairs in the same window. That's the conductor checking the metronome while the musician lifts the bow. Chemistry matters, but it doesn't need a lecture. The agent is clear, low volume, fast-acting in alcohol, designed to dissolve with minimal residue and no obvious bitterness. It prefers still over foam and likes sugar nearby because sugar masks the wrong kind of tongue prickle. Champagne is risky because of bubbles, unless you aim at the inner rim where effervescence is gentler. Placement at 2 o'clock for a right-handed drinker minimizes splatter and maximizes uptake on first sip. That's why the scratch's position matters. It sits at that angle. A red herring blooms in parallel. A dessert blame narrative seeds itself in the group chat. Could the glaze have done something? Someone posts a link to a recall that doesn't apply. The manipulator nursed that possibility days earlier by bookmarking articles and pushing a draft into a friend's search suggestions. Distraction buys time. It also paints the wrong table. We cross-check with handling evidence. Partial prints on the stem are smudged, old, consistent with setup. The live handler's signature is different. No clean ridge detail, but micro sheen where glove polymer kissed glass, and a faint residue line where a wipe started and stopped. Along that line, trace compounds ride, a silicone additive from a lotion uncommon in this group, plus a microfiber strand, bright under alternate light. The strand color matches the tissue paper used to wrap favors, not bar towels. It's the kind of tiny mismatch that accumulates weight when paired with timing. Heat helps. The smart thermostat's micro-fluctuation map shows a warm halo at the bar for 8 minutes before collapse, then a cooler dip, then a brief spike 30 seconds pre-toast. Someone hovered, left, returned. The return aligns with the diffuser's scent burst and the playlist's clink cue. Redundancy. If the glass wasn't selected yet, the sensory nudge compressed hesitation. People moved as one. Which brings us to the last handler. Prints don't match family. Lotion compound doesn't match friends. The unknown device sits within 10 meters during the window. Camera loop muddies faces, but not reflections. In a chrome pitcher, a blurred silhouette bends close, hand high, wrist turned the way you turn when you're dropping, not wiping. A single frame, 2 pixels wide, is not a confession. Paired with logs and chemistry, it becomes a sentence. You test alternates. Could the agent have been in the bottle? The pour pattern says no. Pouring would distribute dose randomly across flutes and increase onset variability. Here, onset is precise. Could it be a canapé? Symptoms say unlikely. Ingestion window is too tight, and others would have complained of taste changes. The glass remains the only vector that matches speed, exclusivity, and control. There's also behavior. The fiancé moves to help but glances at the speaker, waiting for a cue he doesn't know he's obeying. The twin arrives first, stops a half step out, palms lifted. That micro-freeze reads like someone recognizing the exactness of a plan and briefly hating it. Then, she enacts her role, host mode, tidy, organize, deflect the narrative toward dessert. It's a script coached by several voices, one louder because it never spoke aloud. The final tell sits on the lip. Under magnification, a faint meniscus stain arcs away from the scratch, a halo not made by wine alone. It's a whisper line left when a microdrop clings and then rides into liquid. It points to application timing within 60 seconds of the toast. That's fresh work. That's hands in the last moments. So the mechanism is plain, not theatrical, not baroque. One marked flute, one stage spill, one timed cue, one clean delivery angled at a right-handed reach. The manipulator tightens the clock. The twin executes the visible motion. The fiancé covers the beat. The glass does the rest. Now, let's look at what the body leaves behind when minds try to erase themselves. Prints, skin cells, thermal traces, each tells a quiet version of the same event. If the delivery was the glass, the truth is the residue. We start with partials. On most flutes you find smudge stems from setup, older flattened oils, low ridge fidelity. On the marked flute, the ridge detail is incomplete in a different way. Wipe arcs that begin at mid-stem and lift just before the base, consistent with gloved handling followed by a cosmetic clean rather than a full wash. Gloves don't leave fingerprints, but they do leave friction signatures, polished ovals where polymer microscopically burnishes glass. Under raking light, those ovals catch. They align with the hand geometry of a small wrist angle, right dominant. Now, skin cells. Even gloved hands shed. Air carries skin, hair, fibers. On the rim, we recover a mixed trace, the bride's epithelial cells, expected, and a minute non-dermal compound embedded in the residual film. It reads as silicone with a rare additive chain, a boutique lotion profile that doesn't appear in the bride's group. We sampled purses, bathrooms, and guest hand creams. Nothing matches except a trace found on a discarded favor tissue near the service corridor. That tissue carries the same silicone chain and a faint citrus note used to. Mask, neutral scents. Subtle, but specific. On the stem below the abrasion line, a microfiber sits lodged against the scratch. Under spectrum analysis, it fluoresces in a hue matching the favor tissue rather than venue linens. This is a Chekhov's fiber. It corroborates motion. Wipe with a cloth you alone touched, then stage that cloth's disappearance. The cloth itself is gone. The fiber stayed because scratches are small vaults. Heat fills in behavior where cameras stutter. The venue's smart thermostat logs micro-deltas every 30 seconds. We map a warm zone hovering at the bar, 8 minutes pre-collapse. Then a drift away, cooling. Then a sharp spike 30 seconds pre-toast, lasting 20 seconds. The exact window the diffuser burst fires and the clink cue lands. That brief presence reads as a person stepping in, completing a task, and stepping out. The spike's footprint is smaller than a crowd's and larger than a single outstretched arm passing by. A body, stationary, torso angled. This is not milling. This is intent. We cross-reference device proximity. The unknown handset pings within 10 meters during the spike, advertising for accessories, then going dark. That cadence, aggressive scan, silence, is control behavior. It suggests the manipulator moved into position, confirmed the speaker connection and diffuser sync by proximity, and withdrew. No hands on glass, but hands on timing. What about the fiancé? His prints are present, but their age tells their own story. Oil oxidation and dust deposition place his stem touches in the setup window hours earlier. He handled many glasses, then shifted roles. During the spike, his device sits across the room. He glances at the speaker because he's been conditioned to trust prompts. That makes him complicit in pacing, not in application. The twins' biometrics are sparse where it matters and dense where it doesn't. Favors, ribbons, taped place cards. She's everywhere on paper. On flutes, she's ghostly. Not absence by nature, absence by design. On the marked flute specifically, we find no latent ridge, but we do find a faint crescent of the same silicone additive on the inner thumb imprint zone. Too faint for print, strong enough for chemistry. It paints a picture. Glove off briefly? No. Glove on, lotion beneath, heat plus pressure wicking trace through a pinhole or cuff gap. Careful, not perfect. The foreign compound becomes a social filter. This lotion brand sells in a handful of boutiques. Receipt pulls show a recent purchase by a catering temp registered under a borrowed name. That temp's shift overlaps the setup. The hair from the discard bin carries mitochondrial markers linking to the same family line as the temp's real identity. That's the manipulator's ghost flickering into flesh. We aren't proving touch on the glass, but we are proving presence in the system, near the service corridor, near the tools, near the timing devices. Now, the micromarks on metal. The tongs next to the ice show minute dents at one tip that match contact with hard glass at a shallow angle. No residue, but the pattern fits the abrasion crescent on the rim. Tongs as prop, then instrument, then prop again. Hosts do this without thinking. Planners do it with a schedule. Heat plus residue gives us sequence. The spike overlaps, the scent burst, and audio cue. The residue halo on the rim arcs away from the scratch as if a drop settled and moved with first lift. The twin's position places her within arm's reach at that second spike. The unknown device's proximity places the manipulator within whisper distance of the speaker and diffuser. The fiancé's micro delays bridge the gap, buying seconds while onset begins. 3 rolls, 1 moment. We test for alternates again. Could the silicone trace come from venue stock? We swabbed staff supplies. No match. Could the heat spike be a cluster of guests? The thermal field would broaden and flatten. Here, it rises like a point source and drops fast. Could the fiber be airborne? Probability says low given its lodging in the scratch and its color matched to favorite tissue. What the biometric trail shows is simple. Intent leaves a chemistry, timing leaves a temperature, and control leaves a radius. The glass doesn't accuse, it describes. And what it describes is a last handler not in the bride's circle, a planner who stood close but didn't touch the rim, and a twin who moved the instrument into the only hand that mattered. We move from proximity to presence. A ghost is only a rumor until it occupies a doorway. Start with the guest list. On paper, the RSVPs look clean. Names, +1s, dietary notes. But one line reads wrong when you run the metadata. A profile photo recycled from a stock image set, reverse searchable. A surname that doesn't appear on any of the bride's or twins' social graphs. An RSVP sent from a device that never again engages the thread. That handle belongs to no one in the room. Yet the head count says someone stood where that invitation pointed. Door camera metadata fills the gap. The entry logs show a time lag. The system records a door open at 1:12 p.m., a close at 1:13, but no face capture. On most days, that's a glitch. On this day, the camera loop was tuned to blur sequence. Cross-referencing the loop's cycle with the thermostat's micro deltas, we get a warm body crossing the threshold during the blind interval. Not a ghost, just someone who knows when to be invisible. Catering rosters add weight. The company hired 2 temps. Paperwork shows 3. One name appears in pencil in the kitchen manager's notebook. Cash paid, signature reduced to an initial. When you ask staff to describe that person, you get adjectives, not features. Helpful, quiet, or a cap. This is how a manipulator moves, through roles that signal function, not identity. Access without attention. Discard bins keep what people think they've erased. From the bin behind the service corridor, a single hair that doesn't belong to family or friends. Mitochondrial analysis links it to the same family line as the temp's real identity, which surfaces when you match cash gift card purchases to rideshare accounts activated nearby. It doesn't name the manipulator. It anchors their body in the room. The exit path is just as careful. A rideshare pickup 2 blocks away, not at the curb. Paid with a gift card bought at a chain store where receipts don't attach names unless you ask. The route avoids main cameras, taking a right where most take a left. If you trace the driver's dash cam reflection, you catch a glimpse. Cap, mask, a backpack with a small sticker half scraped. Not a portrait, a silhouette. Consistent with the hands from the cafe footage, the double-spaced typist sitting near a flickering outlet. The body travels with its habits. Now, the scent device. We already tied a brief pairing to the unknown handset during setup. Fingerprints aren't clean, but the cartridge housing holds smudges with the same silicone additive found on the flute's trace and the favor tissue. The temp worker alias appears on a sheet that lists who handled setup props. It's not proof of poison, it's proof of touch on timing hardware. Together, the speaker, diffuser, and router show a hand that didn't pour, but did conduct. Door timing, kitchen movement, and playlist edits align into a route. Entry during the loop, service corridor transit, a pause by the credenza long enough to confirm firmware and queue, a minute at the diffuser to align, burst to toast. Then kitchen again, adjusting trays, folding into staff rhythm. Presence without performance. That's how you stay in a room and never land in a photo. A micro story confirms eyes on. One guest remembers a new girl resetting napkins in parallel lines no one asked for. Another notes someone who always stood in thresholds, half in the kitchen, half on the floor, never owning space, always passing through. It's a posture of access. People like that can watch everything and belong nowhere. We test against coincidence. Could the RSVP be a data entry error? Possible, but the borrowed image and one-time device suggest intent. Could the hair be a contaminant from another event? The bin contents date stamp to the hour after collapse. Could the rideshare be a random passenger? The pickup time sits within 2 minutes of the playlist's terminal edit and the router's last phantom ping. Random becomes alignment when the pattern tightens. The manipulator's presence leaves one more fingerprint in behavior. During the toast delay, while the maid of honor runs long, the unknown handset emerges, pairs to the speaker, then drops. A small tempo nudge follows, just enough to stretch applause. That's not panic, that's control reasserted. The twin improvises a spill to refresh the glass. The fiancé buys seconds with a joke. The third mind ensures the environment cooperates. Consider the borrowed name on the guest list. Crosstown, that name ties to a co-working lease used for late-night logins. The cafe slip gave us the IP. The co-working space gives us the badge pings. On the day of the party, the badge doesn't move. But a camera in the lobby catches the same backpack sticker leaving 3 hours earlier. The timeline holds prep, entry, conduction, exit. People ask for the face. In cases like this, the face is the least reliable witness. We build presence from edges. The RSVP that shouldn't exist, the door that opens during the loop, the cash temp with a lotion no one else uses, the single hair in a bin that shouldn't matter, the rideshare paid with a gift card, the synchronized device that breathes only when timing needs a push. Add them together, and the ghost stops being a story. It becomes a person who stood in the room and left on schedule. Physical presence confirmed doesn't close motive. It closes doubt. The twin didn't act alone. The fiancé didn't control pace, unaided. A third mind guided the room with systems and left through the service door. Now we can stop asking if someone else was there. We can start asking why this person chose these people, this day, and this method. Consider the plan the twin thought she owned. It wasn't murder, it was narrative control. A slow, deniable sabotage, something that would make the bride wobble, not fall. Maybe a mild agent that mimicked anxiety, maybe a mislabel that led to a dizzy spell and an early end to the party. She framed it as a correction, not a crime. She wanted leverage in private, not a body in public. But a second score was layered beneath hers. The manipulator took her scaffolding and tightened the bolts. Her deniability depended on ambiguity, symptoms that could be blamed on stress or sweets. Their scheme depended on precision, onset within a minute, collapse within 2. She rehearsed white patterns and placement. They tuned clocks, firmware, and scent. Her plan breathed, their plan marched, message nudges rewrote intent. When the twin hesitated, drafts landed like pep talks. Trust the timing. After the speech, refresh, then smile. She read them as coordination with the fiancé. He didn't write them. The manipulator did. Language bled across devices, giving her the sense of a co-author who understood the rhythm she craved. In reality, she was being walked from caution to impact. Her original method was diffuse. A bottle, a batch, plausible dispersion. The manipulator narrowed it to a single glass. They reduced variables by swapping labels that nudged guests toward champagne. They engineered a toast window with pace control. They ensured a camera loop blurred sequence. The twins' improvisational talent, spill, wipe, center, became the visible act that would carry the blame. The fiancé's fear of exposure became a tool. He wanted the affair to remain a rumor to himself and a secret to everyone else. That fear made him easy to steer. The manipulator drafted reassurance in his voice, then fed it back to the twin at critical beats. He thought he was choosing to be steady. He was repeating words placed in his path. Every calm text bought seconds exactly where the plan required them. The manipulator built fail-safes that pointed downward if the system failed. If the playlist glitch outed interference, the digital evidence would still show the twins' searches, her recon, her discreet purchases. If the toast delay killed potency, a cue would prompt a glass refresh caught in the minds of witnesses as her idea. If the router flicker exposed the admin edit, the temp worker's alias would take the heat. In every branch, the twins sat under the brighter light. She never knew she was handled. She believed she'd architected careful harm, a private lesson in consequences. In truth, her steps were reframed into a direct method. The shift happened in increments. A suggestion to choose champagne over mixers, a reminder to tidy the front row of flutes, a message aligning her movement with a cue she didn't realize was machine-made. Each small nudge repurposed her behaviors into a delivery protocol. 3 seams illustrate the convergence. First, timing. Her calendar blocks said, "after the speech," vague enough to preserve choice. The manipulator's diffuser program and playlist set it to the second metronome. When applause peaked, scent fired, clink landed, and the room moved. Her window became a blink. She complied because everything around her said, now. Second, selection. She wanted dispersion to blur origin. They pushed a single marked flute. The micro scratch, the placement angle, the staged wipe, these turned her hospitality into a blade. The guest flow she practiced, step, tidy, smile, was exactly the choreography needed to present the selected glass without looking like selection. Third, narrative. She had drafted the dessert blame in her notes, planning to float it if anyone felt sick. The manipulator preceded the group with recall links and steered search suggestions. When collapse came fast, dessert was already the simplest story in the room. Her cover didn't just exist. It arrived on cue, ready-made, looking like her idea. Across the room, the fiancé played his part, believing he was preventing chaos. He kept the toast on track, cracked the right joke when silence threatened panic, and hovered near the speaker like a stagehand, trusting lights to change on schedule. He never touched the rim, he touched the pace. That was enough to align reveal with onset, shock with confusion, and delay with exit. From above, the manipulator watched the waveform hit peak. They didn't need a hand on the glass because they had hands on everything else: sequence, signal, story. When the playlist hiccuped earlier, they patched. When the speech ran long, they stretched applause. When the router flickered, they slipped into the blind spot. Each adjustment pulled the twins' loose plan into a tighter noose. This is the shape of convergence. A chronic jealousy finds a partner in a mind that prefers instruments to fingerprints. A need to be seen as singular meets a need to be the only one holding the clock. The twins' agency doesn't disappear, it gets harnessed. The fiancé's fear doesn't absolve, it makes him predictable. The manipulator's orchestration doesn't create evil. It aligns incentives and removes exits. By the time glass met lip, authorship was shared and responsibility braided. If nothing failed, the manipulator vanished with a neat arc of proof pointing at the twin. If something failed, the twins' improvisation would be the only unusual act to survive memory. That is the elegance and the cruelty of this design. It turns a human flaw into a lever and calls the movement inevitable. It wasn't. It was conducted. The first wobble isn't moral. It's mechanical. 30 minutes before the toast, the playlist stutters. A bright track jumps, then repeats a bar. Guests glance up. A tech-savvy friend tilts his head the way people do when a rhythm breaks. He moves toward the credenza, fingers already reaching for Bluetooth settings. The manipulator's metronome just coughed in public. Tension. The manipulator needs seamless cues to compress the window. The twin needs invisibility. If the glitch exposes remote control, the plan becomes a story about interference instead of a moment about a glass. Consequence of failure. Scrutiny shifts to the sound system, and with it to timing, device history, and the ghost's fingerprints. Action. The friend opens the app and sees an unfamiliar device in the pairing list. He frowns. He's about to tap forget. Across the room, the unknown handset wakes, then spoofs a name that looks like the speaker's own model. The list reshuffles. The friend hesitates. Humans trust labels. He runs a test. Disconnect, reconnect. The speaker answers with a soft chime. Music returns, but now the cue order isn't quite what he expects. The manipulator patches in real time. They push a firmware stability note into the device's info pane and preload a new autoplay cue that hides the two-tap clink behind a more familiar intro. The cue still exists. It's just buried deeper, ready to surface at the same minute. Control regained, but the effort leaves artifacts. Log entries, Mac churn, a burst of admin pings. Turn. The friend shrugs and steps back. He decides the hiccup was a streaming issue. That decision buys the manipulator the room again, but it costs them clean logs. The patch leaves a footprint that will later tie cafe hands to credenza sound. The twin feels the wobble, too. Her phone buzzes with a draft that populates like a thought. Trust the timing. It lands in the fiancé's tone. She reads it, exhales, and puts down the cloth she's been folding and refolding. Panic recedes. But a plan this tight doesn't like noise. Noise invites humans to improvise. Improvisation is where risk lives. Tension. She wants to execute the small motion she practiced, spill, wipe, center, without an audience. The glitch made the credenza interesting. Eyes drifted there. If she moves now, she becomes part of a fix. If someone remembers her near the speaker, they might later remember her near the flutes. Action. She steps away, resets her path. Favors first, smiles, soft greetings. She rebuilds her cover. The manipulator senses the delay and nudges the environment back into the groove. They slide a transitional track with crowd-pleasing nostalgia to draw attention outward, away from hardware. People sway, phones lift, cameras point everywhere but the bar. Turn. The room relaxes on schedule. The twin returns to position without looking like a return. The try-fail cycle resolves as a near miss, plan preserved, margin thinner. A secondary effect ripples to the fiancé. He catches the glitch, glances at the speaker, then at the twin. His stomach drops. If the tech looks rigged, the bride will ask questions later he can't afford to answer. He reaches for the chorus, a joke about our friend the Bluetooth that gets a mild laugh and papers over the oddity. He believes he saved the vibe. He also bought the manipulator 15 seconds to reassert control. Tension. The manipulator needs that laugh to land so they can bury their patch. The fiancé needs the crowd's attention to turn away from the credenza and toward him, where he feels safer managing people than he does managing systems. Consequence: if the laugh dies, the friend resumes tinkering. If tinkering resumes, someone will hit reset and timed cues will vanish. Action. The manipulator echoes the joke with a tiny tempo lift precisely under the laugh line. It's subtle, but it stretches the chuckles into applause, as if the system is agreeing. Humans love agreement by machine. It feels like competence. The friend pockets his phone. The maid of honor checks her notes. The beat moves forward. Turn. Success. Partial. The glitch is contained, not erased. Logs are dirtier, hearts are faster. The twin's hands shake enough that she rehearses the wipe in air before touching glass. She almost aborts. Then her screen pulses again, a calendar nudge labeled refresh front row. Neutral words, sharp timing. She decides to be the host she practiced being. The thing is, a patch like this trades stealth for stability. The manipulator kept the room, but they left pattern residues everywhere. Admin pings, adjusted cue positions, a spoofed name that flickers twice in the pairing list. These will matter later. For now, they matter in psychology. Fragility enters the system. Everyone involved knows, without saying, that the plan no longer feels effortless. It must be forced into place. That is how anxiety becomes performance, and performance tightens the next. Mistake. Now the room drifts past schedule. The maid of honor leans into a story that lands well and runs long. Laughter keeps arriving in waves. Glasses sweat. The marked flute sits untouched longer than planned. Tension. The agent's potency decays with time. The manipulator's precision depends on a narrow window. The twin needs a clean moment that doesn't look manufactured. If the glass lingers, the dose risks sliding from decisive to ambiguous. Ambiguity kills their narrative control. Action begins with small corrections. The manipulator nudges tempo, a near imperceptible lift under the speech's second anecdote, to signal applause early. But the crowd rewards the storyteller instead. Momentum belongs to the mic. The unknown handset pulses, pairs to the speaker for a beat, then drops. It's an attempt to land the two-tap clink sooner. The maid of honor smiles, waves off the music with a joke about, "I'm almost done," and keeps talking. Machines don't outrank friends. Not here. The twin watches the bubbles soften. She calculates decay like a bartender, not a chemist. Tension spikes, wait and risk underdosing, move and risk being seen. A draft appears in her notifications, seeded hours earlier. Refresh front row after story 2. Neutral phrasing, perfect timing. She steps forward with a host's apology face and a cloth folded crisp, the way people fold calm. The manipulation shifts to scent. The diffuser delivers a subtle burst 30 seconds before the clink cue was meant to land. Out of sync now, it still primes a reflex. People reach for their glasses without drinking. The twin uses that micro-reach to stage motion. She bumps a flute, not the marked one, just enough to justify wiping. The cloth arcs, absorbs nothing dramatic, but creates cover. She swaps positions with a casual slide as if straightening a picture frame. The marked glass moves to center. Turn partial. Selection is corrected, but the drink still sits. The maid of honor pivots to gratitude and thanks the bride's mother. Applause rises, then lingers again. The agent's clock keeps ticking. The manipulator changes tactics. A soft clink plays beneath the tail of the claps, layered under ambient volume so it feels like coincidence. 2 taps. A few guests reflexively raise their stems. Social momentum forms, but the mic's presence resists. Toasters defer to speakers. A witness notices the switch. She's the detail-oriented friend who earlier clocked the playlist hiccup. She isn't suspicious yet, just observant. Her eyes catch the twins centering one flute with too much care, and she files it in the mental folder labeled Host's Fuss. This will matter later. For now, it only adds risk to the twins' hands. Tension. Potency may slip below the threshold. The manipulator needs the room to drink now without overruling the speaker. The fiancé must bridge without looking like he's hurting. Consequence: if the delay stretches, the onset spreads, and the shock blurs into the end of the speech. Less clean, less useful to the narrative. Action. The fiancé leans into his role. He catches a breath between paragraphs and calls for a pre-toast sip to wet throats for the big words. It's casual, practical, and it lands because people like instructions that feel like relief. He believes he solved hydration. He actually created the drink event the manipulator needed without triggering the formal raise. The manipulator reinforces it. A half-beat brightness under the track makes the room feel permissive. Palms loosen around stems. The twins' marked glass, now centered, becomes the default reach. The bride smiles at the maid of honor, then glances to the twins' tidy row like a cue line on a stage. She lifts. First sip, small. Turn, mixed. The sip happens, but not the full toast. The agent meets alcohol. Onset window opens. The maid of honor finishes to a final cheer. The official toast is seconds away. The manipulator must keep the room in motion while onset builds. Too much pause and concern might surface early. Too little, and the collapse overlaps applause and hides the moment. Tension. Collapse timing versus social choreography. The twin sees the bride swallow and feels a flash of heat, guilt or triumph she can't tell. She stays in character, distributing favors with a hand that doesn't shake. The observant friend sees the cloth again, notes a faint wipe on the same flute's neighboring stem. Detail sticks. Action. The fiancé cues the formal raise. Now, he's cut clean by a final punchline from the maid of honor that steals a last burst of laughter. The room drinks again on the echo. Second sip. Larger. The manipulator lets the clink sound reappear, softer now, more like room noise. It keeps rhythm without calling attention. Turn, success. The dose crosses the critical line. The toast proceeds. Words land, glasses lower. The bride's face changes a fraction late. A blink too long, a breath that doesn't set right. The delay almost cost them control, but the improvisations, refresh, pre-toast sip, layered cue, stacked. The plan survives thinner than paper. Cost registers in the residue. Logs show extra pairings, the scent off schedule, and a witness memory of a careful switch. These artifacts will braid into the chain later. Right now, the manipulator has their window. The twin has her posture. The fiancé has his smile, a fraction too bright. The room moves as if nothing strained behind it, and the clock, finally, obeys. Now the system itself turns unreliable. A brief brownout nudges the router. Lights blink. The network coughs. Tension. The manipulator's remote access drops mid-control. Drafted alibis are queued to post on schedule. If they fail, the timeline fractures. The twin requires consistency to keep her motion invisible. The fiancé depends on posts to anchor where he wasn't. Consequence of failure. No digital cover. More. Attention on tools and an exposed metronome. Action begins with a flicker. Phones lose bars, then return on cellular. The router reboots into a captive portal screen that shouldn't exist for private guests. The admin backdoor is asleep for 60 seconds that feel like 10 minutes. The device that breathes for the manipulator inhales hard, then goes quiet. Drafted alibis miss their first timestamps. One hobby tip, one check-in. They hang unsent in the cloud's waiting room. Across the room, the fiancé's glance turns into a frown. He checks his phone, finds no outgoing success, and slides it away with a small, practiced smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Tension spikes. If the posts don't land, his evening becomes harder to explain. He stalls with presence, asks for a photo, calls the group in tighter, creates a legitimate reason to be seen here, while his digital self supposedly speaks elsewhere. The manipulator adapts by moving. They step into the camera's blind corridor, tuned earlier to loop, and physically relocate near the credenza to reassert control at the edge rather than the center. Hands low, head down. A cable is reseated, not because the cable failed, but because the gesture buys the router time to finish its boot sequence without a curious guest taking ownership. They can't risk being the one fixing the Wi-Fi. They need the Wi-Fi to fix itself. Turn, partial, the network returns, but the missed schedule leaves scars. Timestamps now skew by minutes, creating a seam future investigators can place a finger in. The manipulator patches. They nudge the cue once more, barely audible, to realign the clink after the maid of honor's final line. Building back the path the flicker tried to erase. The twin freezes. She's within reach of the marked flute and feels the room tilt technologically. If attention pivots to tech, any movement near the bar takes on meaning. Tension. Stay still and risk losing the moment. Act and risk being the person everyone remembers near the drinks when the power glitched. Her phone vibrates, a ghost of a notification, the delayed echo of a refresh front row, finally sinking. It's late, but it lands like permission. She exhales, adjusts one glass, then steps back. The motion is so small, it looks like tidiness, not purpose. Drafted alibis begin to post, but out of order. The hobby tip appears after the check-in. The check-in's location metadata resolves to a tower sector 2 neighborhoods away because GPS stalled during the reboot and cached the last good fix. To an untrained eye, it's fine. To pattern analysis, it's a non-human rhythm. Too neat, then suddenly messy. Later, that inconsistency will be the hinge. Action tightens. The manipulator, still in the blind spot, drops to minimal radio, Bluetooth scan off, Wi-Fi and passive monitor, reducing their device's chatter while the router settles. They need the scent burst and clink to land on time. Without drawing a line back to an active controller, they watch the maid of honor's shoulders, not the clock. When the shoulders lower, they cue the tiniest lift in track brightness to tease applause. The applause swells, the room readies to drink. Turn. Execution continues, but digital artifacts multiply. The patch leaves a second set of admin pings, a duplicate DHCP lease, and a briefly visible SSID that flashes default characters before renaming. It's a fingerprint of haste. The manipulator trades clean topology for continuity. The plan stays on its rails. The trail gets brighter. The fiancé covers with a joke about the building's moody Wi-Fi, buying seconds and deflecting suspicion. He thinks he's helpful. He is. The laugh lets the manipulator exit the blind corridor and rejoin the room as a shadow. Cap lowered, tray lifted, role resumed. They don't need the network now. The machine cues are already staged. The rest is choreography. Tension resolves into inevitability. The twin is where she needs to be. The marked flute sits centered. The bride raises her glass on social cue, not digital order. The Wi-Fi flicker fails to derail the moment, but it succeeds in one thing. It stamps the timeline with human scramble. That scramble is gold later. We end the cycle with a cost ledger. The manipulator kept pace by going hands-on, which means presence overlaps timing windows more tightly than planned. The fiancé's alibis post, but with a wobble that suggests scheduling, not spontaneity. The twins' hesitation becomes a tell to at least one observant guest. Try fail, try patch, try push. The metronome ticks again. The room drinks. The crash is seconds away. It begins with a smile that doesn't finish. The maid of honor closes her notes. The room exhales together. The two-tap clink whispers under the last ripple of applause. Not loud, just enough to set wrists moving. The bride lifts the centered flute, the one tidied into place. First sip was earlier, second sip comes now, unguarded. She swallows. A blink sticks. Her pupils dilate a fraction late. Silence isn't dramatic. It's granular. A laugh cuts, then doesn't resume. The bride's breath shortens by the width of a syllable. The glass tilts, a bead tracks the rim, and then the stem kisses the floor. It doesn't explode, it fails. Sound travels like a pin dropped on tile. Heads turn because sound tells people what to see. The twin reaches first. Instinct collides with intent. Fingers hover, then compress into a cradle that doesn't steady anything. Her face shows two frames at once, fear and recognition, before she locks a host's smile over both. Micro-expression caught in a phone shot, eyebrows knitting, not from confusion, but from knowing exactly how precise this moment was supposed to be. The fiancé is already moving. He gets a knee down, hand to shoulder, voice low and practiced. Hey, hey. He checks airway, fumbles for calm. Then he delays, but not like a villain. Like a man who thinks he can reverse a tide with tone. 10 seconds, 12. He looks for the speaker as if a machine can tell him what to say next. He's waiting for the room to obey rhythm again. Rhythm's done. The manipulator is absence. That's the tell. Their device goes quiet. The diffuser's program ends. The speaker holds its place. A figure with a cap and a tray slides through a threshold and disappears into a service corridor that doesn't hold attention the way a collapsing bride does. A ride is 2 blocks away, idling. Digital silence follows like a glove snapped off. Panic dissolves choreography. The maid of honor drops the mic. A friend who knows first aid pushes forward. Someone shouts to call. The twin already has her phone in hand, but her finger taps a favorite contact before 911. She cancels, breath catch audible to the people nearest, then dials the right number. The call connects at a timestamp that will later matter more than it should. The bride's symptoms are fast without spectacle. A heat flush rising, dizziness expressed as a fixed gaze, a hand that fails to find purchase on the table. She tries to speak and finds air thin. That single second where she knows something is wrong lands like a room losing power. Her glass, on its side, feeds a ribbon across the rug. People step back because spilling is contagious. Discrepancies shout in the margins. One guest says she sat 2 seconds before the glass fell. Another insists the glass fell first. A third remembers the twin wiping a neighboring stem, not hers. The camera loop blurs sequence by design, and now memory does the same for free. Time dilates under adrenaline. Everyone's sure. Everyone disagrees. The fiancé's micro-delays stack into guilt later. Right now, they read as care. He asks for water. He asks someone to open a window. He presses a pulse point he can't locate and says her name like that will anchor her to the floor. He isn't cruel. He is unskilled. The manipulator counted on that. A child stands near the dessert table, cookie midair, eyes wide. He says, "She was by the drinks," meaning the twin, meaning earlier, meaning innocence wrapped in proximity. The detail-oriented friend watches the cloth in the twin's hand and sees a pattern. Wipe, center, smile, then now, hands hovering. She feels a wrongness she can't articulate yet. She will later. The twin's voice stays in a register people associate with calm. She needs space, don't crowd. It's correct advice. It also gives her room. She pockets the cloth without thinking. The favor tissue that wrapped it falls to the floor behind the credenza, a bright scrap that will turn into chemistry later. She doesn't see it go. She only hears the siren in her chest. Someone finally answers the practical question. Who called? The maid of honor says she did. The twin says she did. The timestamps say both, staggered. The operator asks for symptoms. The twin says, dizziness, pale, can't breathe. The fiancé says she's warm, she's sweating, she's not responding. The words aren't evidence of guilt. They're evidence of sequence and panic. The bride's knees fold, friends catch, a chair becomes a cradle. The toast is over without a word. The playlist fades because someone drags a finger across the phone. The room loses its metronome and finds its heart. The manipulator is already in the back alley, phone dark, head down. Ride arrives on time. A door shuts softly. Then the photo happens. Not a panorama, a reflex. Someone in the outer circle snaps a picture, low angle, meant to capture concern and help with whatever the group chat will need later. In the frame, the twins' eyes are on the glass, not the bride. It's a human thing, regret drawn toward the instrument. That image will travel farther than any log. The moment of murder isn't the collapse. It's the confluence, a timed cue, a centered flute, a second sip, a blink that won't release. In that tight interval, three minds converge and vanish into a single event everyone will later call sudden. Sudden is a lie we tell, because design is hard to see in real time. Paramedics breach 15 minutes from the first wobble. To the people standing there, it feels like an hour. To the manipulator, it's more than enough. They're blocks away when the siren cuts. The room becomes a crime scene in slow motion, a strip of tape not yet placed, a list of names not yet taken, a floor plan quietly turning back into a map. The glass lies on its side, reflecting lights that finally mean help. The bride does not move. The system did. Now let's look at the mechanics of evidence when memory fails. Devices don't feel panic. They timestamp it. We start with language. Extracted text from the twin and the fiancé show mirrored phrasing that shouldn't converge without a single author. Trust the timing. Refresh the front row. After the speech. The cadence is identical, same comma habits, same clipped reassurance, yet sourced from different keyboards. That's the profile of a ghostwriter operating behind two masks. Draft folders tell the quiet truth. On the fiancé's phone, outgoing messages that landed minutes before the toast share a creation signature from a companion app he doesn't use. The metadata shows edit events from another device, then a sync, then a send. He believes he typed them live. The logs show they were staged and pushed. On the twin side, host reminders populate via calendar invites with invisible tags, hex strings buried in the notes field, repeating across days, aligning with key actions. She accepted helpful structure. She also accepted control. Playlists reveal the conductor's hand. Edit history on the venue's Bluetooth speaker app is tied to the unknown device's MAC address. Same model, same OS patch lag we saw paired in the service corridor. The queue shifts. 3 times in the hour before collapse. Once to insert the 2-tap clink under a popular track. Once to adjust tempo during the speech. Once to lengthen applause with a subtle brightness lift. Each change coincides with the manipulator's handset, waking, pairing, and dropping. Human ears heard coincidence. The log heard a timeline. Calendar behavior becomes choreography. The twins' shared event shows innocuous blocks, prep favors, set flutes, after speech. But there's a second layer. Invisible attendees, aliases that never surface in the UI, attach micro-alarms. 30 seconds pre-toast, 1 minute post-speech, refresh at both. Those alarms didn't ring audibly. They fluttered her lock screen with silent vibration and a phrase short enough to feel like her own thought. On the fiancé's calendar, a check-in reminder pings at the toast window to anchor his alibi. When the Wi-Fi flickered, those posts slipped. The drift is proof of scheduling rather than spontaneity. Geofence data tightens presence. The manipulator's device registers within a 10-meter bubble around the credenza during each critical window. Playlist edit, diffuser burst, toast cue. The handset runs aggressive low-energy scans for accessories, then goes dark. That scan-to-silence cadence repeats at the cafe capture days earlier and at the co-working space nights before. It's a signature, not of identity, but of behavior. Now, mirrored language at scale. Search the twins and fiancés threads for word pairs. You get a lattice. Almost done appears in both at 128. We got this appears in both at 135. The fiancé doesn't normally use we in logistics. He prefers I'll. The twin doesn't write got this. She writes okay. Their voices shift under stress or someone tuned them. We match punctuation rhythm, a tell most people don't control consciously. 3-dot ellipses versus 2-dot, space before exclamation versus none. The texts align to the manipulator's earlier posts in the hobby group archive, dormant but not dead. Same ellipses, same breath. The speaker app's audit shows a firmware note inserted with boilerplate language that doesn't match the manufacturer's style guide. It includes a typo the manipulator made in a separate login message months prior. That repetition binds device to hand, not lethal on its own, lethal with everything else. Photos add inadvertent witnesses. The twins' decor shot captures the bar's alignment. XIF says 11:03 a.m. In the background, the diffuser's status LED glows in pairing mode. That state lasts seconds, not minutes. Someone was binding it then. The shot becomes a time-stamped alibi for the device, not for a person. The unknown MAC address appears in the router log at 11:02, leaves at 11:04, reappears at 1:06. Control points plotted like pins on a map. Draft queues expose failsafes. On the twins' phone, a prepared text sits unsent. Let's postpone. Something feels off. It's addressed from a spoofed contact resembling the bride. The content carries the manipulator's comma pattern. If the plan stalled, that draft would fire to reignite jealousy, accelerating action, or at least chaos. In parallel, the fiancé's device holds an unsent reassurance. Proud of you. After speech. He never typed proud of you in prior messages. It's language meant to steady a hand, not his. We layer in the Wi-Fi flicker. During the reboot, the router broadcasts a default SSID for 3 seconds before renaming to the venue's network. The admin pane logs a ghost account creating and deleting credentials earlier that morning. That same ghost account alters QoS to prioritize the speaker and diffuser traffic. No malware, just preferences. Control in plain sight. You might ask about deletion. The manipulator wiped plenty, but caches persist. On the venue's tablet, a thumbnail of the playlist edit screen remains in recent apps. Tiny, blurred, sufficient to show an unfamiliar avatar in the corner. On the diffuser app, the schedule log totals to no active programs. Yet the system clock records a burst at 1:39. The contradiction is proof. Finally, the narrative stack, digital nudges engineered identity. The twin read a host reminder and performed tidiness. The fiancé read, we got this, and performed calm. Neither authored the rhythm. Devices did. That's why the texts feel like echoes. That's why the clocks align when memory doesn't. The autopsy doesn't accuse emotion. It names choreography. Phones wrote the script. Playlists carried the cues. Calendars narrowed choice. And inside that grid, 3 people moved until the room called it sudden. Now, let's look at the motive through the only lens that fits the timeline. 3 needs intersecting. Jealousy, control, exploitation. Each on its own can bruise a life. Together, they build a system. Start with jealousy, the twins' constant background noise, not rage, a hum, years of near wins and second looks. She isn't a caricature, she's a person trained by comparison. Public milestones were accelerants, the engagement post, the registry, the countdown. Her private messages carry a tone you hear in people who want a redraw more than a victory. She wanted to tilt perception, not end a life. That's why her first searches favored ambiguity, symptoms that look like stress. Her motive was to be seen as someone whose presence changed outcomes, not as a destroyer. Jealousy seeks recognition. It craves the moment where attention moves. Control lives in a different body. The manipulator doesn't want attention. They want orchestration. Their logs reveal a temperament that treats systems like levers and people like variables. VPN habits, late-night edits, timed bursts. This isn't a heat-of-the-moment personality. It's a cold planner who takes pleasure in alignment. Control here means deciding when a room inhales. It means building an environment where others will act freely along a path you chose. The diffuser, the playlist, the camera loop, these are instruments. Control writes sheet music. It doesn't play the solo. Exploitation is the hinge. The fiancé's weakness makes the door swing. His affair isn't just a betrayal, it's an access vector. He compartmentalizes, tells himself he can keep things separate. That's the kind of thinking a manipulator harvests. He responds to reassurance and avoids confrontation. His phone becomes a relay for language he didn't craft. His fear of exposure keeps him compliant with cues and quiet about anomalies. Exploitation here isn't just of guilt, it's of predictability. If you know how someone avoids pain, you can set their steps, which brings us to how these motives braid. The twins' jealousy provides fuel, long-term identity erosion that makes correction feel justified. The manipulator's control provides structure, clocks and scripts that remove the twins' room for second thoughts. The fiancé's weakness provides access, devices, schedule, tone. Together, they create a self-justifying loop. Each person's need validates the other's moves. The twin reads, "refresh," and believes she's being a good host. The fiancé posts a check-in and believes he's normalizing his day. The manipulator reads both as compliance. Think about this like a lock. Jealousy is the door, always there, sometimes open, sometimes closed. Control is the key, cut to fit, designed to turn smoothly. Exploitation is the hand that turns it at the right moment. If one piece is missing, the system resists. With all three, resistance vanishes. The door swings and calls it fate. It isn't fate. It's pressure applied at the right notch. Psychologically, jealousy narrows perception. It turns a room full of witnesses into a tunnel toward a single object. The flute, the bride's smile, the moment attention slides. That narrowing is why the twin could rationalize tinkering with labels and practicing wipes. She told herself she was editing the scene. Control loves a narrowed field. It places cues exactly where the jealous gaze will land. The centered glass, the scent burst, the two-tap clink, each sits inside the twins' tunnel vision, disguised as helpful rhythm. Exploitation, meanwhile, rewards avoidance. The fiancé's micro-delays, checking his phone, glancing at the speaker, aren't plotted by him. They're patterned. He learned that machines smooth human moments. He trusts a metronome over confrontation. The manipulator writes into that bias. Drafted reassurances slip in where his voice would normally stutter. He repeats them. He believes he's calming a partner. He's timing a collapse. There's also the moral math. Jealousy justifies intent by shrinking harm. She tells herself it's a scare, a lesson, a reset. Control amplifies method by widening effect. The plans. Geometry makes the result bigger than the twin ever pictured. Exploitation dissolves responsibility by distributing roles. No one feels like the primary mover because each action is small. That diffusion is a design goal. Shared authorship breeds denial. I only adjusted. I only sent a message. I only kept the pace. Notice how the bride sits in their minds. She isn't a person. She's a stage. Jealousy makes her a mirror, proof that one twin is chosen. Control makes her a marker in a sequence. Step 7. Toast. Exploitation makes her cover, an event so public that any collapse will look like an accident first. Dehumanization doesn't need cruelty. It needs focus pulled toward the task. What breaks this triad is not remorse. It's friction. The playlist glitch pried control open. The toast delay forced improvisation. The Wi-Fi flicker revealed scheduling. Each wobble exposed seams where genuine care might have stopped the machine. It didn't. The triad reasserted. That's how you know motive isn't just feeling. It's architecture. So the profile stands. A jealous twin wanting narrative leverage, a controller designing an event that leaves no clean origin, and a compromised fiancé whose fear keeps the rails greased. It comes down to this. Jealousy lit the match, control built the fuse, exploitation made someone else strike it. And in that small, fatal second between raise and sip, the room obeyed the only conductor it could hear. So, why this triangle? Why this day? Why engineer precision inside a celebration that photographs as harmless? Start with adjacency, not intimacy. The manipulator wasn't family. They orbited a shared hobby group where the fiancé moved easily. Months earlier, that space had turned cold, disputes over credit, leadership, a quiet exile. The fiancé wasn't the exile, he was the beneficiary of it. In the manipulator's ledger, he became the soft target attached to the harder grudge. But the real question is, why pair the grudge with twins? Because predictability. The jealous twin overshared. She posted routines, playlists, hosting tips, anxieties coded as jokes. You could build a timetable from her captions. She was the kind of person a controller prefers. Transparent rhythms, public tells, private rationalizations. If you need an environment to obey, you choose the person who's already trying to make it neat. Now, let's look at the mechanics of selection. The bridal shower offered high coverage and low risk. Many hands touch many things. Toasts create synchronized motion. Cameras point inward, not toward thresholds. If your goal is to test how tightly you can steer a room, you pick an event with a metronome baked in. A rehearsal dinner might be too formal, fixed seating, speeches with oversight. A casual party might be too loose, no shared cue. A shower sits in the middle. Soft schedule, strong ritual. Speaking of motive, what does control get out of this? Not drama, not gore. Proof. Controllers treat people like systems and systems like puzzles. They design to see if their inputs produce the outputs they forecast. The shower became a lab. Diffuser as timer, playlist as prompt, camera loop as veil. The bride wasn't the destination. She was the instrument panel. That's how you end up with a crime where the method is the point. There's also leverage. If the plan held, the twin would stand under the hottest light. Her searches, her proximity, her improvisations, each a breadcrumb laid by her own hand. The manipulator could then pivot to extraction. Quiet messages, I can help, I can explain. Here's what to say. That creates dependency. Dependency buys influence inside the social circle that once expelled them. Revenge, but clean. Or cleaner than a confession. Consider the fiancé's role in Why Them? He provided ports of entry, shared devices, predictable phrasing, a need to soothe that made him amplify whatever script appeared on his screen. The manipulator didn't need his loyalty. They needed his avoidance. Avoidant people obey soft orders because the orders promise less friction than a conversation would. In profile terms, he was a reliable relay. Now, why now? Because the calendar offered a publicly stamped alibi for everyone else. The event pinned the crowd. The posts and photos would flood timelines with time marks, even if devices were wiped. That abundance hides the manipulator's precise edits in a sea of noise. If you're designing a signature that stays invisible, camouflage with volume. Let 1,000 phones drown your one MAC address. The manipulator's personal calculus likely included one more variable: audience. Not just the room, but the watchers after. People who would parse the collapse through gossip, not logs. The dessert rumor was seeded days in advance because rumors need time to look organic. The satisfaction isn't in headlines. It's in hearing a false story repeat back to you, while the true one lives in your pocket as a sequence of timestamps. Let's pivot to the psychological need beneath the technique. Some controllers crave proximity to consequence without owning it. They stand close, nudge, then step away before impact. It's a voyeurism of causality. In a locked box analogy, they don't want to live inside the box. They want to know that a knock on the lid makes the mechanism inside whir. The twins' dynamic, mirror and rivalry, gave them 2 switches to press with one finger. Why these particular switches? The jealous twin believed she was correcting balance. The fiancé believed he was preserving calm. Both frames are easy to exploit because they present harm as help. The manipulator wrote into those frames, "Host reminder. We got this." After the speech, language that says maintenance while enacting control. That's the trick. Make the intervention feel like the role they already perform. Endgame, maximal chaos, with plausible deniability. If the bride lived, the room would still fracture. Accusations, distances, a social map rewritten. If she died, the fracture would be permanent, and the manipulator could test a darker thesis. Can a wholly external mind author a crime other people think they wrote? The answer here was yes, until the logs disagreed. So, why them? Because each carried a need the manipulator could tune. Why this method? Because systems obeyed better than people. Why this day? Because ritual compresses choice. That's the motive in plain terms: control expressed through other people's hands, revenge expressed as orchestration, and the quiet satisfaction of watching a room move on a beat only one person heard. Consider the device nobody photographs. The diffuser sits like decor, matte, minimal, forgettable. It doesn't deliver poison, it delivers timing. During setup, it paired once to the unknown handset, then vanished from the app's visible device list. That's common when a controller binds locally, disables broadcast, and runs a schedule from memory. The log claims no active programs. The clock says otherwise. A burst aligned with applause at 1:39. What does a scent burst do? It primes behavior. Micro-olfactory cues shift attention, trigger reaching, and synchronize motion without language. You don't smell "drink now." You feel a nudge, pleasant, anticipatory, a subtle reset that makes a clink sound like instruction instead of suggestion. The manipulator used it as a metronome, not a mask. Fingerprints on the cartridge housing aren't clean, but the smudges carry the same boutique silicone additive we traced on the marked flute and favor tissue. That ties handling, not delivery. The alias signed on the temp roster appears on the setup sheet that lists ambient refresh. Most hosts ignore that line. The manipulator didn't. They needed the burst to sit under the toast like a drumbeat you can't hear. We pulled the device's internal error cache. Manufacturers track small failures, failed wake, delayed motor spin, low fluid warnings. At 11:02, the motor test stalls for 2 seconds, then resolves. At 1:08, a latency spike hits when the router reassigns DHCP. At 1:38:30, the motor fires clean. At 1:39, the app reports idle. That mismatch, action without report, is a hallmark of preloaded routines executed offline. It's also how a controller keeps their phone quiet while the room obeys. A witness remembered a new girl straightening napkins into parallel lines. In the same minute, a faint citrus lifts near the bar. Not strong, not cloying, just present. That's the diffuser's profile when set to microburst. It isn't meant to scent a room. It's meant to notify a nervous system. The maid of honor's second anecdote ran long. The manipulator fired early to create the first reflex reach, then layered the two-tap clink later to seal the motion. Why did this matter more than a timer on a watch? Because external cues recruit the crowd. If only the twin feels a buzz, her movement isolates. If the room feels a simultaneous, pleasant shift, multiple wrists lift at once. Synchrony creates cover. The bride's arm rises among many. Selection hides in sameness. The diffuser's job was camouflage. The pairing event tells us something about presence. During setup, the unknown handset bound the device, pushed a schedule with offsets, then turned off broadcast. The router log shows the handset near the credenza for 90 seconds, the time it takes to pair, test, and confirm. The thermostat's micro-deltas register a stationary body just left of the diffuser during that period. Later, at 1:38, the handset doesn't wake. It doesn't have to. The device acts alone. That's control delegated to hardware. We checked for alternative authorship. Could a venue employee have pre-programmed it? The vendor's default schedule runs at the top of the hour, not on applause. The cartridge brand isn't the venue's house stock. Purchase history links a gift card to a chain store where the replacement oil was bought 2 days before. That same gift card paid for the rideshare that left 2 blocks from the venue. Edges connect. Critically, the diffuser explains the twins' refresh moves without requiring constant instruction. Her calendar received silent buzzes? Yes. But her body was also being tuned by the room. Early microburst, tidy. Later microburst, center. Final microburst plus clink, lift. She believed she was reading the vibe. The vibe was programmed. We also found a subtle tell in the device's lid. One corner shows a faint abrasion arc. Glove polymer against matte plastic, consistent with quick cartridge swaps during setup. That matters because it proves hands-on configuration in the room, not a remote schedule inherited from a prior event. The temp alias signed for ambient refresh and table accents. Both positions stand near the diffuser and bar. Access isn't coincidence, it's logistics. Put this in sequence. At 11:02, pair, test, close broadcast. At 1:08, network flicker logged by the diffuser but ignored by its scheduler. At 1:38, microburst primes the room. Wrists adjust, the twin steps to tidy. At 1:39, applause crests, clink layers. The second sip lands. No poison in the mist, only rhythm. That rhythm made human choices feel like group behavior. The overlooked device becomes the hinge between digital intent and physical action. It ties the unknown handset to the room during setup. It binds the temp alias to touch. It explains why the room moved together when no one shouted, "Cheers!" And it shows you the manipulator's signature, not fingerprints, but timing deployed through a machine everyone ignored. Interviews don't begin with questions. They begin with silence measured against a clock. The twin sits first, shoulders squared like a student before an exam. She asks for water. She doesn't. Drink it. The first line she offers is rehearsed. I was hosting. Then the second. I wipe glasses because of fingerprints. She's choosing nouns that sound harmless. Hosting, wiping, fingerprints. We start with language. Trust the timing. Refresh the front row. I read the phrases aloud without attribution. Her eyes lift halfway through the second one. Small tell. She recognizes cadence before content. She says, That's something he might say. Not, I said, not, he said. Distance. It's a defensive map. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, we place the diffuser's microburst at 1:38 and the playlist cue at 1:39. Her calendar nudge hit in between. I ask what she felt when her phone vibrated. She says, I didn't feel anything, then corrects. I felt busy. Busy is the word people use when they can't safely say pulled. She shifts to blame the dessert rumor she seeded days earlier, almost with relief, like stepping into old shoes. Then We surface mirrored phrasing. The fiancé's text, "We got this." Her draft reply, after the speech. I slide them side by side. Same comma habit, same clipped reassurance. She deflects. "We spend a lot of time together. You start to sound alike." It's plausible in couples. It's less plausible across separate devices with shared edit signatures. The thing is, she's not lying to be clever. She's lying to survive the story she told herself. Presenting the diffuser logs disrupts her script. She didn't plan for scent. She didn't know the song could be a timer. She whispers, "No," like someone finding a new door in a house they've lived in for years. I show the pairing event during setup, the motor test at 11:02, the burst at 1:38:30. She stares at the photo where her hand is mid-wipe. "I thought I was tidying," she says. Subtext, "I didn't think I was delivering." We pivot to the marked flute, the micro scratch, the centering move. She admits the swap without calling it a swap. "It looked off. I fix things like that. It's what I do." She's telling you her identity, order, symmetry, control, but not the method. I ask why the cloth ended up pocketed. She says she needed her hands. I ask why the favor tissue in the bin carries the same additive as the flute trace. She doesn't understand the chemistry, so she reaches for a feeling. I shouldn't have touched anything. True and incomplete. Now, let's look at the mechanics of her motive under pressure. I bring up the unsent draft addressed to a contact name that looks like the bride. Let's postpone. Something feels off. She says she didn't write it. She's right. That's worse. It means a voice she trusted was ready to steer her if she resisted. She starts to cry without tears, dry, contained, controlled. She says, "I never wanted," and stops, because finishing that sentence creates a category she can't inhabit. Then the name surfaces, not the legal one. The alias saved in her phone. A handle connected to the co-working badge pings and the cafe IP. I ask who that is. She says, "A planner friend." Not family, not friend. An insertion point. We hold the silence. She fills it. They help me calm down. Calm down is the sound of control landing as care. Separate room. The fiancé. He sits differently, legs planted wide, hands pressed to denim. He starts with confession the way avoidant people believe confession ends things. "I had an affair," he says. "I told her it was over." He's ready to admit the sin he can narrate. He isn't ready for the one he helped execute. We start with his digital habits, drafted posts that appear out of order, a check-in 2 neighborhoods away that resolves seconds after the toast. He blames Signal. He blames the building. Then, I show him the companion app signature attached to his outgoing reassurances. He frowns like it's a math problem. "I typed those," he says, and then, because he can't reconcile the log, "I must have." Must is not memory. It's hope. Speaking of motive, I ask what he feared most, exposure or consequence. He says, hurting her, meaning the bride, meaning the twin, meaning anyone but himself. I read, "We got this." He nods. "I would say that," he insists, but in his prior threads, he never does. He's an "I'll handle it" person, not a "we." The profile shifts. He wasn't authoring calm, he was channeling it. We present the diffuser logs here too. He blinks at the idea that a scent could be a script. He laughs, the short kind people use to reject a fact that fits too well. "Come on." Then the playlist edits, the 2-tap clink, the admin pings during the flicker. He stops laughing, he asks, "So who?" The question betrays him. If he needed a who, then he already knew there was a someone. I put the alias down between us. He looks at it too long. That's not recognition of a stranger. That's recognition of a contact that once felt safe. He says, "They just helped coordinate," then winces at the word. Coordinate is a controller's verb. He glances at the door, then at his phone, as if it might vibrate with instructions even now. We circle back to the moment. Why the joke about the Wi-Fi? Why the call delay? He clings to intent. I was trying to keep people calm. He did. He also paced the collapse. He gave the manipulator seconds wherever they were needed most. He provided cover with human warmth, which is why he struggles to see himself in this picture. Warmth used as instrument doesn't feel like complicity until you measure the beat. The confrontations don't end with confessions, they end with alignment. The twins' words mirror a voice that isn't hers. The fiancé's posts carry a hand he didn't see. Presenting the diffuser logs and the pairing history cracks their certainty. It doesn't make them monsters, it makes them parts of a machine. And once they see the machine, they say the name the machine hid behind. So, we trace the alias through money first. Gift cards look anonymous until patterns repeat. The rideshare out of the alley was paid with a reloadable card purchased at a chain kiosk 2 days earlier. The same card funded the fragrance oil. Transaction times mapped to a single register. Pull the store camera. A figure pays in cash, then taps the kiosk. No face, but the hand is distinctive. Short nail on the index, a healed knuckle scar. That detail will matter in a second. Now, let's pivot to the cafe. The unmasked login came from a public network where the manipulator felt invisible. Packet capture snagged a real IP before the VPN engaged. That IP leases to a shared workspace upstairs. Lease records list a small team under a generic services company. Among authorized users is a person with a matching knuckle scar in a badge photo. A workplace safety seminar, still frame posted on the space's bulletin feed. It's the first human shape around the alias. Voice is next. The temp roster entry for the catering shift includes a phone number that routes to voicemail. The greeting is generic, but the formant pattern, how vowels sit, aligns with a tutorial this same services company posted months earlier about event optimization. We run a simple spectral compare, not courtroom proof alone. As part of a lattice, it tightens the ring, which brings us to the rideshare account. The alias used a fresh email and the gift card, but the device fingerprint, OS version, patch lag, Bluetooth stack matches the unknown handset in the venue logs. More importantly, the account contacted support once to correct a pickup pin in a different part of town days prior. In that ticket, an attachment auto-included EXIF data, model, time zone, and a distinct language pack installed for a hobby app tied to the fiancé's group. Adjacent social sphere confirmed. We cross-reference the temp worker registration photo. It's lightly disguised, cap, mask, but the eye spacing and the indented left brow ridge match the shared workspace badge. The catering coordinator remembers the voice as flat, polite, quick. That fits the profile. Cold calculation housed in civility. Public records clean up the rest. The shared workspace lease lists a contact who once moderated threads in the fiancé's hobby group before the quiet exile. Suspension notice language from that group includes the same typo embedded in the spoofed firmware note on the speaker app. Controllers repeat their mistakes because they trust systems, not editors. Finally, the network graph resolves. The alias handle sits at the center of two clusters, hobby group remnants and venue-adjacent temps. Edges include the gift card serial, the cafe IP, the workspace lease, the voice print, and the rideshare device fingerprint. One node links all. The person behind the badge with the scarred knuckle, the flat effect, the schedule obsession. The manipulator has a name. We don't need to say it yet. The profile is enough. Control ends at the threshold. The arrest is quiet by design. No chase, no spectacle. 2 plain clothes at the shared workspace, 1 uniform in the hall. The manipulator looks at the badge, then at the door jamb where the paint scuffs end. Eyes record exits before words happen. They nod once, place the phone face down on the desk as if surrendering a tool, not a life. Cold calculation meeting a process they thought they could outthink. In transit, they ask one question. Am I being detained or arrested? It's a script line. When the word arrested lands, they exhale through the nose. No surprise, just a recalibration. Controllers don't fight the wrong arena. They pick the next lever. Interview room, fluorescent buzz, chair legs square to the table. The manipulator's posture is economical. Spine aligned, hands folded, sleeves at a consistent cuff. They answer name and date with clean, clipped lines. No filler, no When asked if they want counsel, they say, "I'll answer basic questions." It's not bravado. It's triage. Keep options open while mapping the investigator's knowledge. We begin with soft ground, employment, schedule, the catering temp shift. They choose modesty as armor. Just extra hours, helping a friend, setting linens. They avoid nouns that carry agency. No coordinating, no programming. When pressed about the diffuser line on the setup sheet, they say ambient refresh and let the words sit like they're meaningless. That's an attempt to make the device sound like air. Moving from the scene to the suspect's profile, we introduce the cafe login. Public network, partial IP, the shared workspace lease. Their eyes don't blink at the sequence. They nod once at the word workspace, then ask, "Do you have a warrant for my device?" Calm, but the real question is embedded. How far did you get? Which cache survived? We place the phone on the table, sealed. We do. They smile without teeth, the kind of smile that says they've modeled this outcome. They pivot to distance. I never touched the drinks. True in the narrow sense, false in the system sense. Controllers love true-sounding lies. Now, let's look at the mechanics of their first crack. We play the audio of the two-tap clink layered under music. We lay out the speaker app's edit log with the spoofed firmware note, the typo that matches their old moderator notice. It isn't the typo that breaks them. It's the timeline. 11:02 pair, 1:38 burst, 1:39 clink. They inhale just once, slightly audibly on the 1:38. That's a tell, not of guilt, of ownership. They try a pivot. You're projecting intent onto noise. The line would work if the lattice wasn't tight. We answer with the diffuser's error cache, the motor test at 11:02, the latency spike at 1:08, the clean fire at 1:38:30, while the app reads idle. Then, the router's default SSID flash, the ghost admin account, the QoS nudge prioritizing speaker and diffuser traffic. Systems speaking to systems. Presented with the unmasked login and diffuser data, they pause, recalibrate, and choose a new narrative, outsourcing the act. She, meaning the twin, was unstable. She asked for help. I told her to postpone. They offer a plausible story where their role is cautionary. It leverages what's already true, the unsent draft that said, "Let's postpone. Something feels off." They claim authorship of that draft as exculpation. See? I was the break. It's a clever move. It also admits proximity to the console. We ask about the gift card, the rideshare, the oil purchase. They don't flinch at money. They flinch at rhythm. Coincidence, they say. Then, we slide the rideshare support ticket with the XIF-laden attachment, the hobby app language pack linking their device culture to the Fiancé circle. That's adjacency turned into access. They look at the table, not the paper. Controllers hate when edges touch without their permission. Confronted with the mitochondrial DNA link from the hair in the discard bin, the mask slips a millimeter. Not panic, irritation. They swallow, then speak slower, picking words the way you pick locks. Hair is transfer. You can't place me only in inheritance. They're right about the science, which is why we never lean on a single strand. We place it inside the network graph, where their alias sits at the hub. Structure defeats quibble. We shift to voice. The catering roster voicemail greeting. The event optimization tutorial. The spectral overlay is on screen. They don't contest the sound, they contest meaning. Lots of people sound alike. True in the abstract, useless against the aggregate, now to motive. Why them? They attempt to flatten it. I didn't know them. They did. Through the group, through the twins' posts, through the fiancé's avoidance. So we don't argue feeling, we argue access. We read the calendar invite tags, the invisible attendees, the hex strings, then the punctuation rhythm in the mirrored texts. Same ellipses, same space before exclamation habit replicated across platforms. That's not just access. That's authorship. The real crack comes on the Wi-Fi flicker. We describe the router reboot, the captive portal that shouldn't exist, the admin backdoor sleeping for 60 seconds, and the drafted alibis missing their timestamps. Then we repeat the building's maintenance note. Brief electrical brownout at 1:36. They nod before we finish the time. It's a small, eager nod, the body recognizing a beat it counted in real time. Knowledge only the controller would have. They catch themselves, still their head, and say, "You can't prove I was there." The thing is, proof already lives in the way they reacted to the minute. They pivot again, now aiming the lens fully at the twin. She practiced the wipe, she bought the cleaners, she centered the glass. All true. That's exploitation's nature, hide inside someone else's verbs. We agree, cleanly. She's charged with conspiracy and tampering. Then we finish the triangle. You're charged with murder. The word lands. For the first time, a muscle jumps at the jaw. We offer counsel again. They decline again. Control insists it can still steer. So we change the arena. We lay out the try-fail cycles, the playlist glitch the tech friend almost fixed, the toast delay that forced improvisation, the Wi-Fi flicker that broke scheduling. Each wobble corresponds to a hurried patch, the bogus firmware note, the sent off schedule, the duplicate DHCP lease, the briefly visible default SSID. You call it noise, we say. We call it your signature. Their hands, which have stayed still, now separate, palms flat on the table, fingers splayed, grounding, seeking friction. They ask for water and drink this time. Controllers drink when contingency surpasses model. That's the physiology of losing the map. The last tactic is empathy as tool. You like systems, we say. You built a beautiful one. It worked until it didn't. The logs aren't angry. They're just true. Some suspects argue. Controllers prefer to rewrite the report. They offer a draft. I advised. I scheduled reminder language. I never intended harm. Intention is a story. Outcome is a timeline. The timeline wins. We end with the one analogy that fits. You treated their minds like a locked box. You knocked, and the mechanism whirred. But box's record dense. Every tap is a mark. They look at the phone on the table like it might still perform for them. It doesn't. We stand. The door opens. Control cracks, where it always does, at the seam between prediction and record. So we formalize the roles the evidence already assigned. The twin is charged with conspiracy and tampering. Conspiracy for aligning intent and action with an external agent. Tampering for the marked flute and the staged wipe that placed selection under her hand. The charge reflects her plan's original scope. Deniable sabotage that never stayed deniable. She pleads not guilty, then pivots to cooperation when presented with the invisible attendees in her calendar and the photo catching her eyes on the glass. Cooperation buys her leverage later, but it doesn't erase the sequence. The manipulator is charged with murder, not accessory, not solicitation. Murder by design under statutes that read intent through method and outcome. The indictment relies on the lattice, paired device logs, playlist edits, diffuser schedule, network anomalies, and the unmasked cafe login tied to the shared workspace. Their counsel argues no physical delivery, a technical dodge that misreads causation in a system built to distribute authorship. The court isn't measuring fingerprints on a vial. It's measuring a program written across a room. The fiancé faces obstruction and fraud, obstruction for the micro delays that interfered with aid, and the coach statements after, fraud for alibi, posts framed as live when they were scheduled. He flips early, trading a plea for testimony that maps the manipulator's language into his outbox. He testifies to the cadence he thought was his, the "we got this" he now hears as a ventriloquist's line. It's not absolution, it's an angle at sentencing, fear exploited rather than malice engaged. In the hearings, a phrase repeats, "the room obeyed." Prosecutors use it to frame orchestration. Defense teams try to recast it as groupthink, an accident magnified by panic. But the digital autopsy is patient. It lays out the applause-aligned microburst at 138:30, the two-tap clink at 139, the mirrored texts, the QoS tweak prioritizing the very devices that cued motion. The jury doesn't need to love the jargon. They need to see the rhythm. They do. The twins' sentencing hearing carries the most crowded gallery. Family seats divide by aisle like a map drawn by grief. Her statement is short. She owns the affair. She calls her adjustments tidying, then stops using soft words and says, "I wanted to change how she looked at me." That's jealousy stated without ornament. The court hears motive without justification. She receives time for conspiracy and tampering, with a suspended portion tied to cooperation and a mandatory program that reads more like accountability than therapy. Conditions include a ban on contact with the manipulator and the fiancé, and a technology use restriction that limits automated scheduling features. It sounds quaint until you understand how scheduling became a weapon. The manipulator's trial is cooler. No tearful rows, fewer breath catches. They sit with the same economy of posture we saw in interrogation. Their counsel tries to separate inputs from outcome. This is event management, not homicide. But the state builds the bridge. The diffuser is metronome, the playlist as cue, the camera loop as veil, the calendar tags as hand on someone else's wrist. The unmasked login and the rideshare EXIF become anchors. So does the Wi-Fi flicker, where their body nodded at 1:36 before anyone else in the room remembered time at all. The verdict is guilty. The sentence is long, reflecting the court's position that distance doesn't dilute authorship when distance is the method. The fiancé's fate lands softer. He avoids prison through a structured plea. Probation, mandated disclosure to future employers of his obstruction charge when working in any safety-adjacent role, mandatory counseling on coercion and accountability, and a community program speaking to digital manipulation and consent in non-romantic contexts. How influence can hide in logistics. It reads like a modern penalty for a modern vector. He wears it like penance he understands only in parts. Families fracture under the weight. The bride's parents withdraw from public ritual. The twins' mother writes letters to both daughters, then stops when the responses sharpen into self-defense instead of repair. The fiancé's siblings split the difference. One maintains contact, one refuses. Each convinced the other misreads complicity. The hobby group quietly edits its admin policies, limits moderator tools, and pretends the change is about growth rather than a ghost in their archive. The public narrative diverges from the evidence, as it always does. Gossip prefers a single author, the jealous twin, because singular villains make cleaner stories. Podcasts circle the temp worker angle, but miss the diffuser's significance, treating it like set dressing rather than a metronome. A rumor about spoiled dessert persists because it flatters a human appetite for explanations that taste familiar. Facts stand unbothered. They don't compete. They wait. The bride's memory becomes a cautionary symbol in local circles, not as a true crime headline, but as a story told at showers and parties in lowered voices. Check the glasses. Don't over-engineer. Trust your sense of off. The venue adds a quiet protocol. No personal devices on the house network during events, vendor logins rotated, fragrance devices locked. It's not paranoia, it's hygiene. Analytically, the takeaway isn't novel. Jealousy is a durable fuel. Control is a precise tool. Exploitation is a reliable hinge. What's contemporary is the interface. Harmless apps behaving like instruments, reminders functioning as levers, playlists carrying commands under music. The case becomes a training slide for investigators and event managers alike. Measure rhythm, not just residue. Map intent through timing, not just texts. Treat helpful structure as a possible control surface. There is one quiet resolution most won't hear about. The observant friend, the one who saw the centering move in the cloth, writes her timeline the night of and locks it behind an email to herself. Months later in court, it aligns within seconds to the device logs. It's not that memory is unreliable, it's that unanchored memory drifts. Anchored, it holds. That's the difference between a feeling that something was wrong and language that names where the wrong sat. In the end, the system that killed the bride also recorded itself with fidelity cruel enough to be useful. The manipulator goes to prison believing they lost to sloppiness, not to people. The twin learns how quickly tidying can become a method of harm. The fiancé learns that delay is a choice with consequences, not a neutral buffer. The rest of the circle learns a smaller lesson. Technology doesn't just capture our rituals, it can conduct them. Consider this when a room moves together and you don't know who set the beat. Her phone still holds a draft apology to her sister, unsent, unsendable, a single sentence that will never answer anything for anyone left behind. If you want more deep dives into the criminal mind, subscribe now. Let me know in the comments, what psychological flaw led to this killer's downfall? And if the hidden manipulator fascinates you, watch the next case where digital control becomes its own signature.